Hello everyone. Welcome to our channel. Don't forget to subscribe and activate the notification bell to receive updates on every new video I upload. Without further delay, let's dive straight into the video. On this channel, there is an announcement. I'm sorry in advance, guys, because this video has lots of grammar and spelling mistakes. I don't have that much time to correct grammar. If I have the time, I will definitely correct any grammar mistakes, but doing so will prevent me from making the next videos on this channel. I trust you understand my message, and I appreciate your overwhelming support for the previous videos on this channel. I want to clarify that from now on, I will definitely upload videos to this channel, if not every day, then at least one per week. Once again, I apologize in advance for any grammar and spelling errors you may have encountered on this channel. Please continue to support me and show your love for this channel. Kurenai was an esteemed genjutsu user who had quickly gained fame throughout the village for her skill with the art, with the loss of most of the Uchiha. Village had been pushing for genjutsu users to rise in rank to teach the next generation. That was enough. Besides being one of Anko's only friends for her to take the exam. Lastly, there was Sato and fit a 6-year-old chunin. It was quite surprising to see him push for advancement so late in his chunin career. He had been an instructor at the academy and seemed content to stay there, but he submitted his application on time and got in. Shikaku doubted that anyone in this group would pass the entire exam. They were all quite skilled. Most of them just lacked the necessary experience they still had to gain, but they would get a taste of what it means to be a hin, and hopefully that would inspire them to continue. They were about 15 minutes into the exam when Shikaku noticed something strange. Sato was acting unusual. Each shinobi had a dossier or a file that included previous exams, mission statistics, confirmed deaths, personal history. And behavioral missive. Sato was not behaving as his file had led Shikaku to expect. It was possible that the file didn't know all the secrets of a shinobi, but the behavior shouldn't be so out of place. It was noted that Saito was an academic, but he was also supposed to be anxious. He almost failed his first tuning exam due to his nerves. However, of the four, Sato was the most sensible, and he was flying through the exam that it could almost be ruled out, assuming he had just studied his questions well and other general areas, except he was just looking at his paper and wasn't cheating. The other three were being clever, but Shikaku could more or less determine how they were managing. It was likely that Yui and mimed if they had exchanged answers previously. A8 was taking notes of what the other two were writing in their margins, and it seemed that Anko had sent a snake before the start of the exam, and it was coiled around a beam over Sato and A8. While all this was happening, Sato was sitting writing. His eyes didn't leave his page, and he was almost done with his test. After another 5 minutes, Sato stopped writing and put down his pencil. The other three test takers stopped and looked up as he turned his papers over and sat up straight on his seat. Shikaku didn't blame them, but still took note of it. It seemed that Sato's belief in his answers was unsettling them. If it wasn't that, then they hadn't been as quick to secure Sato's answers as they had hoped to have been. There were still 40 minutes left after. However, this would be a good lesson for them if they failed, because they had made an assumption about the performance of one of their opponents. Then it would be as good a metaphor as any for underestimating an opponent on the field. Any chance they had before was now severely damaged. Diminished. It was imperative to get the 70 questions that the other examinees had and bet on the 20 that no one knew. Even if they got half of Sato's answers, there were 55 answers left. Terrible odds for this level of exam. The questions were not easy. Shikaku had taken care of that. Sato was sitting still, calmly looking ahead. Shikaku didn't know how, but this wasn't Sato. Of course he didn't make any external signal to alert the other three. If a shinobi snuck into the hin exams, then he had the ability to take them. There wasn't any rule prohibiting new chunin or even geinin from honestly participating in the exam. Was simply too dangerous. However, whoever this shinobi was doing quite well. That being said, what they also did really depended on the results of their exam. Anyway, it would be interesting to see how this plays out. Time passed incredibly slowly for the two kunoichi as A8 finished her exam with 15 minutes to spare. Mitarashi barely had enough time to put down her pencil before the timer ran out, or time report to the Hokage Tower for the second part of the exam. The four of them stood up and walked out. He waited until the door closed before walking over and grabbing Sato's exam. He scanned it and chuckled. Perfect score. Whoever it was out, this shinobi was good. Shikaku got up and headed to the Hokage Tower. He usually returned home after finishing his work, but this was proving to be interesting. For once, Anko walked next to Karina and behind Sato and A8. The test, there was no she had come out like her or Karina, and they had planned, and she was upset. She remembered Sato. He had been something of a bully when she joined the academy. He had been jealous that Orochimaru had chosen her as his apprentice. Of course, after his sensei's defection, Sato smugly ridiculed her and questioned her own loyalty. She had told herself that it was just because he was an inferior shinobi and would not ascend to anything higher than an academy instructor. That was what helped her overcome his bullying. and the rumors he spread about her inferiority. Then he came in and fucked not only her, but also Karina and Yate in that exam. Well, it really pissed her off. There was no way Sato of all people could have finished the exam so quickly and approved, so just I was trying to sabotage the follow one more time. You need to calm down, Anko, she growled and rolled her eyes. At Kurenai Prim Serena Ice Queen Kurenai, her best friend, you know he not only fucked me back there, you also stuck the short end of the stick there. He scarred us there. It doesn't matter that we do it too now. There is no way I have enough questions to prove, so that reflects badly on us as hopeful young people. Don't give me that we would be fine if he hadn't. It's not just his fault, Anko. We should have done better to get her answers while she was vulnerable, and we didn't. Anko gritted her teeth and looked away. She hated every time Kurenai was right, which she often was. I'm going to give her a piece of my mind, Kurenai sighed, but she sped up before her friend could try to stop her. She quickly passed by Yate, who gave her an amused smile, and caught up with Sato, who was walking emotionlessly down the street. Hey Sato, what the hell was that back there? Sato looked at her, and it was almost like he didn't know who she was. Idiot, I was pretending like they had never met. Something like that. I apologize, my Tar-Sison. I didn't realize that ending so quickly would prevent your test. Nonsense, Sato. And really, my Tar-Sison, do you think being polite is going to work now, after calling me Zora's Piente all these years? Oh no, but I mean, we're both Konoha shinobi, right? Maybe we could just start over on a new sheet. Anko would have laughed at her audacity if she wasn't so upset. Go ahead and fit in. Why the hell do you think I'd start over again after all that you've done? Sato actually seemed to grimace. Or was it a joke? Before nodding his head, I apologize for my behavior. My Thalasis, I didn't treat you like a fellow shinobi, and that's embarrassing of me. I promise to try better. Keep an open mind in the future after this exam. I will do my best to stay out of your way as best as I can and not cause you any more problems. Anko couldn't process what Sato was saying. She had known him for years, and this was a complete reversal than she had been expecting. She didn't know how to respond directly, so she settled for looking at him and pushed harshly. If this is another prank and it fits, then I'm going to hit you so hard it will make the last one look like a prank training session. She didn't wait a response. He turned around and walked agitatedly towards Kurenai. What happened? He apologized. Kurenai blinked in shock, and Anko was relieved that she wasn't the only one who didn't expect that from Sato. The instructor may have been a decent teacher, but he wasn't a very good person. He had almost been arrested by Uchiha for trying to start a mutiny before the Uchiha massacre happened. He didn't have many friends. Maybe he's trying to make a new start with this exam. Anko, I don't think he's Sato, and Cade called me Meyer Sison. Something is going on here, and I intend to find out what. Anko kept her eyes on Sato as they approached the Hokage Tower, the most defended buildings within the town for several reasons. In addition to being the symbolic source of strength for the town, it also housed most of the confidential documents, the prohibited jutsu and the lists of shinobi. It was also the office of the Hokage himself. In addition to all that, there were cells in the sub-levels of the tower that could house prisoners of interest to the people. Today they house more than 18 captured spies, most of whom belonged to Orochimaru, truth be told, had already passed through you and were now going to be the young aspirant's second test. The aspirants would have an hour to break the prisoners and find out what information they had already provided. The spies into the village, the toughest shinobi, had been selected from the halls of you, those who would see helping a low-rank shinobi of the leaf as an insult, those who would actually make a good test. The examinees had 1 hour, and if they didn't have success, they would fail. Of course they would go on to the next exam, but then they would find out if they passed or failed to become hin. They had to pass all 3 by a respectable margin. Scraping through 2 exams wouldn't be enough. Sarutobi had come to see how the exam was going. Hin watched as all the examinees came in and settled in from their observation window. They would be kept under observation, and they would be released one at a time to break their prisoners. Yuzin was taken out of his observation when Shiken Nara stood next to him. Hokage-sama, I have something to report. Oh, go ahead. Nason Shikaku bowed his head slightly and handed him a folder. The results of the first exam. As he took them, he couldn't help but notice the interest in the Nara's eyes. That meant that this mystery was important. He looked at the results and raised an eyebrow. Of the 3 groups, there were 3 scores perfect. It seems that our Chunin are more skilled than we thought. These 3 candidates achieved perfect scores in an almost identical way. Very unusual. What suspicions? He observed as the veteran Jounin sighed and looked at the report. I suspect an undercover agent who has not been given a rank. Jounin officer wants to claim what he thinks he deserves. It was not an unheard of situation in the history of the village. Similar scenarios had happened. There were almost a dozen cases of that same phenomenon this time. However, it made Hiruzen nervous. He immediately thought of someone he hoped his pupil was not planning anything that he had not discussed with his tutor. The boy was already deeper in the life of a shinobi than he had wanted for his age, but he would respect the boy's decisions if this were Naruto. Then he would give him an unbiased evaluation and objective of his exams. He only hoped that the boy would be able to handle the responsibility he was putting on his shoulders. His stomach sank even more when Ibiki entered the room with a frown. "Hokage-sama, this Sato and Kabe has to be in disguise. What happened?" He came in the room, he asked his target a single question that was not even answered and he left when interrogating him. He provided the requested information. "I think the Sato stole the information beforehand, or yes," and Vicky the veteran interrogator coughed lightly into his hand and looked towards his Kahe. "Is the shinobi you have randomly testing?" The Yamanaka Shikaku looked up sharply at that, observing the Sundaime carefully, even he didn't know much about Agent Konoha Shikaku had 3 possible candidates for the identity of the terrifying censor and was interested in discovering the true identity from Toshinobu. Yuzin couldn't contain the sigh that left his lips. "My thoughts exactly, and Vicky, I wonder how the rest of the examinees will fare." The final part of the Jounin exam was scheduled to take place at one of the Jounin training camps. These they were much harder to find and access than normal training grounds and minimized any stray civilians or unlucky genin stumbling upon an active training ground. Anko marched furiously past dinner and to training ground 22, a large valley on the outskirts of the north of the village territory. Ahead of them once again was Sato and Kabe. Thanks to their training with Orochimaru, as well as their own natural inclinations, Anko was confident of having the best performance in the interrogation exam. She knew that Kurenai was also damn good with her twisted genjutsu, but Hanko's style required less time and less effort, a little more messy but extremely efficient, so Hanko took it a little personally when she came out and saw that 3 others had completed their interrogations. Before her one of them was Ikabe. She had the nerve to nod her head when she arrived, as if they were actually starting over. She almost tripped when Karina pushed her and her friend almost glared at her and rolled her eyes with a huff. She tried her best to calm down and relax. He began to make a mental list of all his hidden seals and weapons. Everyone knew what the 3rd exam would be. An all-out fight was unspoken among those who would group up in their teams of 4 against the other 2, but Anko was eager to give him a lick or two. Then Fitz in the Elakura saw him tense a little and look at her unconsciously. She looked away as soon as she realized they had made eye contact, and Anko's stomach sank. She knew that Sato and Kabe were not the sensing type. Those who were gifted with the ability to feel chakra in his environment were the most adept at sensing killing intent. Thinking about how ways she could stab him non-lethally, it wasn't necessarily killing intent, but it still remained a type of sensor could distinguish passing impulses of premeditated fantasies of mutilation. Whoever was walking in front of them was not the master who couldn't sense her if he was 6 inches behind him. Not only that, but he had now just alienated anyone who could have remained disguised as another shinobi throughout the whole thing. The exam, the imposter knew that he still had the intention of ambushing him, and the shinobi were a paranoid group. He would not be able to convince them that his intentions had changed. With a silent growl he began to indicate to Karina, and that his original plans would have to change. Unfortunately, they would have to leave AA to defend themselves, since Sato's impostor would assume that the 3 of them were on board to eliminate him. He tried to ignore Karina's glare, and as they quickly exchanged signed messages, whoever this infiltrator was, Anko was going to have some harsh words with them about how really they had managed to screw up his Jounin exam. They would definitely be buying him some dango at least. Naruto quickly surveyed the battlefield. They had been led to training ground 22. It was one of the 5 places Kabuto had predicted would be. He would use it based on the information that a handful of Rod's agents had provided to Naruto. It was one of the smaller training grounds and would force the examinees to remain locked up during combat. He squirmed as the aggression around him strengthened the negative emotions he felt. These shinobis allowed the overwhelm were almost astonishing. It was taking all of his training up to this point not to react visibly to each and every violent thought. Kurama was proud of him, he believed, but he remained silent so as not to distract him. His senses were going crazy, but that was well, it was giving him time to get used to them, because when the fight started, it would only get worse. They were all lined up, and Kakashi appeared before everyone. Everyone stood firmer as a sign of attention. Kakashi had only gained a more mythical status after he disappeared from the public eye. Naruto felt Kakashi's eye bathe in him, and he swallowed hard. He knew both he and Jiji knew he was in the exam. He gritted his teeth and held his head. Sato's head was held high. He would make them proud. He would prove that he couldn't be anything but a Junin. He could help the people. He would help the people. Examined. Everyone has an hour to express their experience in combat. Here are the rules: no killing, no jutsu, forbidden, no abandoning the arena. The wind whistled through the valley while everyone took a breath to calm down. Begin the battle. Or in the space of a second the groups had already separated, 3 groups all facing each other. Of course that lasted only a moment before everything changed. Anko and Kurenai jumped away from Hayate and Naruto, forming 4 groups. It was then that Naruto took advantage of that moment. Of surprise from the other two groups and A8 to release his other two shadow clones on the other two groups and replaced himself with a nearby rock when a volley of shuriken passed through where his body had been a breath before things went from aggressive to vicious. Most of it could be left at Naruto's feet, but the two kunoichi had not helped. Tensions rose when the other two groups realized that their cells of 4 had been reduced to cells of 3, and the kunoichi's retreat incriminated as also involved if the 3 absent shinobi reappeared along with the kunoichi, that would make a cell of 5 applicants against 2 cells of 3, and alone yet one cell went after Ano and Kurenai, while the other launched itself towards A8 was. Smart. Eliminate the threats visible and keep your eyes open for ambushes or traps. Naruto normally would have capitalized on his paranoia and stayed hidden until the other two cells weakened each other before breaking in normally, but he wanted to leave his mark, he wanted to be noticed, he wanted to be remembered, he had to avoid rolling his eyes as Kurama laughed in the back of his mind. Naruto dropped suing and clasped his hands. Kajibun Sin no Jutsu 20 clones spawned at his sides and jumped towards Adante silently. They rushed forward to face the members of both cells as they stayed behind waiting for ambushes. Ironically, they were the easiest targets. Naruto closed his eyes and relaxed for a second while the shadow clones created a relay of empathy. It was a side effect of the jutsu that had never been observable before. Each clone had their empathy. The more clones he had at a time, the faster his empathy was processed and turned into reflexes. The first time he used the jutsu it had left him with a huge headache, but with training he had minimized it. His clones fell on the 11 shinobi with efficiency. Which he had learned from his days in Anbu. Each cell he had to deal with a new cell of 5 men, felt his confusion when a boat of children invaded the battlefield, and felt it turn to panic when his clones immediately incapacitated 2 ninjas, 1 Abiram, and the other Nara. Only a few shinobi had noticed him and his clones, and those 2 had been the most dangerous to him. If Nara had been a little faster she could possibly have gotten the rest of the examinees to join in the fakes. As it was, his clones were slowly being pushed on the defensive when the 3 cells of 2 men and A8 began to thin out the herd. The shadow clones were meant for reconnaissance. One good hit was all it took to take them out. The blades they flew through the air and blood was spilled as the groups were driven together. His clones worked together perfectly and began to react before his enemies could physically react. He watched him passively as one hapless Chunin was beaten by 5 clones who managed to isolate him before continuing. After 2 clones kicked his knees with axes and destroyed them, his screams were silenced by a dispassionate kick to the head. These were allies after all. Quite brutal. Naruto-kun, are you sure this is the path you want to travel? Look at all the pain. What causes who you are supposed to protect? I have to follow the rules of this world. If I want to change it, it doesn't justify my actions, Kuram-kun, but I have to do what I can. This is what I was trained to do, and it will allow me to help the fastest Biju I ever had the intention to dominate your life with this purpose that you jealously fight for. I just wanted to show you the truth of this life. Knowing the truth and not acting on it is like evil infects the air to breathe that apathy. I can feel the hatred that resides within everyone. We know how cruel inaction really is. This is my choice, Kurama. Millions have ignored your pain, and that of your brothers. If I am going to be the soul that will make a difference, I have to act with every ounce of my being. You are my family. This is what family does for others, what you have already done for me. Behind you, Naruto pushed his head to the side, dodging the kuna, and that would have torn a chunk of his ear off and fallen from the tree branch in which he had been hiding. In front of him was A8 with Anko and Sina, and on each side a child. What the hell are they thinking now? No, Anko, don't underestimate. Naruto jumped towards Adante, and once again he took advantage of the fact that someone underestimated him. A8 went to take a hit and Naruto flowed smoothly under his sword. Like he was an amateur, A8 lost his grip on his sword as Naruto slashed his wrists and broke his grip. He immediately spun and kicked the sword. The chakra-infused strike sent him out of bounds. Anko immediately pushed A8 away back, and the 3 got into taijutsu stances. Naruto identified them as snake-style willow stance and village-style stance. Houni took his position and heard them gasp as the Uchiha Interceptor's stance instilled fear and disbelief in them. His blue eyes looked at them coldly, mocking them with their lack of dojutsu. All the tuning fools hoping to get a promotion tried to learn Interceptor taijutsu and use it to take advantage of their infamy. When the clan was still getting stronger, the Hinya would actually teach the stance to any Chunin or Jounin dumb enough to ask the Uchiha. Then he would laugh if someone tried to use it in combat, especially if it was an ace for an exam. You couldn't use the stance without the Sharingan. Naruto and Itachi had discovered that you could actually use the interceptor without the Sharingan. You just needed some other form of prediction to replace it. A8 showed a smug smile and ran towards Adante. Anko followed closely behind him. Those 2 did not have the hesitation that Kurenai felt was his first mistake. A8's willow stance was based on flexibility, just like the Anko's snake style, and the interceptor responded with strong grabs and shoves that caused them to lose their balance with rapid Debilitating blows that hit when they couldn't react. Kurenai entered the fray in an effort to defend his allies. Naruto could easily predict their attacks just by their movements. Taijutsu was definitely not his strong suit. He blinked as Kurama broke a genjutsu and realized it had almost opened for a final blow from Anko. The promising genjutsu missed. Soft Kano was deadly. That level of illusion approached the level of Itachi himself. Anko screamed when Naruto deflected her blow and quickly broke his wrist. He jumped up and towards the tree branches while she was trying to hit him blindly. She broke my wrist. I'm going to kill him. Anko no Mitarashi's anger and frustration that had been bubbling up this whole time overcame her better senses and forced her to jump immediately. After him, she found herself face to face with 3 clones that were attacking her. They attacked as soon as she was within reach. She dodged and hit, destroying one. The second stepped back a bit as the third managed to latch onto her waist. Instead of trying to regain her balance, the clone pushed against a branch and launched them into the air and over. The cliff screamed as the third clone descended on them with a brutal donkey kick that folded her in half and sent them flying towards the stones below. Naruto watched anxiously as Heiei regrouped with Kurenai. The genjutsu specialist could be a thorn in the side. Her side, she was the one most likely to eliminate him from the rest of the Jounin. It seemed like she didn't like how he had treated her friend, and she was getting angry. She was scary. No wonder Asuma was so in love with her. That being said, her clones were starting to slow down a bit. That wouldn't work. Kajbunin no Jutsu. The 2 Jin cursed and jumped back when 50 clones suddenly appeared and swarmed the battlefield. The original somewhere between them. Who the hell is this guy? Karina snorted in exasperation. He is Hokage's pupil, the Uzumaki. How do you know that? Karina opened her mouth to respond and then closed it, trying not to blush. She still didn't feel comfortable with how close she had become to Asuma. Her teammate became a friend. Well, her attention was brought back to the present when Yates pushed her backwards out of the way of Akuna, who would have severed her hand at the wrist. He was constantly retreating on the defensive. Naruto was pressing the offensive with ruthless zeal. He had practiced with Asuma long enough. The spy on the telltale signs of wind chakra. The boy wasn't extending it as far as Asuma's trench knives, but his Tsukinai might not have been made of the right metal. It was still lethal and couldn't be blocked directly. That was the important thing she had spied. As her clones had reduced the competition in the other cells at the end of this exam, there would be many injured shinobi. Some of the others were still up and fighting a final group of 3 ninjas against a horde of 30 clones. It was absurd. She knew rank clone ninjutsu B. She could make a single clone she had believed to be incredibly powerful, and one of her most unexpected assets she had actually planned to show off in these exams, weaving a combination of genjutsus at the same time. Therefore, she was incredibly intimidated by the number of clones she was generating. The boy in front of her were strong. Naruto was a small army of his own. She jumped on a clone and kicked him towards another ganger doppel. She was suddenly knocked down. A body crashed into her and almost put a kunai on her before realizing that it was Heiei's bleeding body. He could feel the clones taking position around him and he readied his kunai. He was about to jump to face them when a huge cloud of smoke erupted beneath a nearby cliff. A bruised and bleeding Anko appeared standing on the ground. Head of a huge green snake, he watched as the clones seemed to respond as one with a start. He realized that somehow whatever one observed the others would also do. His heart fell. Anko dissipated as many clones as you could, tried to make his way through the clones towards Anko. She slashed 2 before a third grabbed her. She swung her knife on her arm and was shocked when blood flew from the wound. Real Naruto wasted no time disarming her and swung his own kunai at her chest. She replaced herself at the last second with her fallen weapon, another feat she had anticipated showing off to the examinees. She swooped in and disarmed Naruto, as well as all the seals he had in his bag. She watched him frown as he put away the stack of seals. I'm sorry, Naruto-kun. Asuma may have told me that you have taken after his father in many ways, such as hiding an arsenal of weapons. Your abilities have been impressive, but you must be careful. And Sato, now Samanko's curse deep down, gave Karina a little hope that her invocation could have eliminated the 30 clones at once. It seems that they were the last 3 ninjas standing. The 2 helpless and the boy who in no way I had the intention of entering the exam. Whether I succeeded or failed, I was sure that the story of this test would go around the town. Asuma always spoke very highly of you, Karina. I think he has feelings for you. The young man looked her in the eyes with a focus that wavered on the disturbing. You should tell him your fears about getting into a relationship at this stage of your career and your unresolved feelings for me. Tarsaisan. Kurenai's eyes widened in shock at the secret she had never told out loud, only to see Naruto's hands glowing with sickly green chakra and run towards her. He engaged in taijutsu, and she tried to avoid his fists as best she could, but inevitably one made contact. She felt a stabbing pain in her leg as she collapsed beneath her. The blow left no blemishes or tears, but she still felt her muscles stop responding. Chikura Nesu chakra scalpels. I still don't have the Controlled to use them for their intended purpose, but with them I am never unarmed. After this first alert the medical ninjas, this shouldn't take much longer. 3 more blows followed, and Kurenai couldn't escape, her limbs lying useless on the ground. She had never felt so helpless, all at the hands of a child who wasn't even 10 years old. I'm sorry for scaring you so much, Kurenai-san, I promise I won't tell anyone your secrets. I alone were too scary. Your genjutsu skills are amazing. Ichikan would have been impressed. He couldn't help but stare as the boy turned around and put his hands together. Only one opponent was standing. He realized that against his own warnings to his teammates. Before he underestimated his abilities at all times, Kajinjutsu, and when 200 more clones appeared around the summoning of the giant serpent, Kurenai realized that he had not stopped underestimating him. End of the chapter. If you liked it, subscribe and activate the bell. A breeze blew idly as Naruto looked at the summoned lie beneath his feet. He regretted not focusing more clones on her from the beginning. She was reckless, powerful and cunning. She was a student of a Sannin. Naruto had many discussions about the Sannin with the Sundai, their strengths and weaknesses. Kabuto was especially distrustful of Orochimaru. Tsunade was a Senju Jiraiya, was her father's sensei. Anko would have learned directly from the mouth of one of the best. She could feel his anger like a bonfire. He had enraged that was almost as bad as good. The summons rushed towards Adante and eliminated 20 clones at a time. The remaining army wasted no time and ran towards the imposing snake. The clones grouped themselves into squads and acted as one. They divided into squads of long range, medium range, short range, and sensors. He would have to thank Anko for such a challenge, and the Sundai for preparing him for it. The Sannin were known as such for a single feat, fighting salamanders. Anzo to a stop through their teamwork and summoning. Hiruzen had admitted without his summons that his students would have fallen like so many others to the power of the salamander. His use of summons was so integral to his styles that his nicknames were the Sannin Toad, the Sannin Slug, and the Sannin Serpent. The summons changed the game, and the summoners were fiercely protected resources from their villages. Naruto had been taught how to deal with them. In fact, he had taught himself the best way to fight a summon was to banish it. Where the snake came from was an armored giant, but Hanko didn't. Naruto sacrificed dozens of clones just to have a single squad on the snake's back. Anko wasted no time in engaging them. She fluidly dodged their chakra scalpels with terrifying speed. Each time she moved forward to attack, a hail of kuna and shuriken intercepted her. She had to stay alert and prevent her from synchronizing with her. Summoning it breaks her rhythm and breaks her synergy. The snake roared beneath her entire squads, falling to her thrusts. Anko stopped the clones, only to hear the rustle of paper as she drew back. Her eyes widened when she saw the edge of a seal, and her heart froze as the esoteric markings flashed and ran up her leg with a burst of smoke. Her summon disappeared beneath her. Naruto watched as the Chunin looked at the 120 clones that surrounded her. Her breathing was irregular, and her anger slowly grew. Beyond normal aggression, hatred was overcoming her. She was consumed by it. Naruto felt gagging at how strong he was. Give up, Anko, healthy, otherwise I won't be marked. Take it off. Naruto was paralyzed as he watched Anko charge at the nearest clone. His hatred reached its peak, and then he screamed in agony and collapsed to the ground, clutching his neck, his hands. The scream sounded like some buried memory or a forgotten dream, and Naruto felt great sadness emanate from Kurama as she began to sob and writhe. He snapped out of his trance and ran to her side. He was there in a moment and his clones quickly joined him. He removed the summoning interruption seal when she didn't calm down and continued to scream in pain. Naruto closed his eyes and allowed his enhanced senses to envelop Anko. He could feel every darkness within her. He understood her and knew her on such a deep level. It felt bad, too easy. All his little quirks, all his bitterness and regret, pity, fear, hate. He eventually located the source of the trauma. He pulled the jacket off his shoulder and saw the throbbing, shifting seal on his neck. His emotions were a hurricane of blind hatred and rage, but through the tempest was able to discern its origin. Orochimaru, a cursed seal, so Kabuto had taught her about them. Naruto knew she had one, but he didn't think she would be so reactive. Anko was struggling violently on the ground. Her blood was stained on the ground. Her clones tried to hold her steady. She opened her brush and ink and tried to clear his mind. Never before had he used his empathy so closely with someone in so much pain, and it was hard to stay calm. He wet his and moved to start, then hesitated. The exam is still happening. I'm supposed to act like a jounin. She is not a leaf Kunoichi right now. She is my enemy. If I help her, that will affect Naruto. Come listen to me now. Naruto's hand stopped when his best friend's words spoke so passionately from within him. I have no love for most of the human race. The hatred I have for them will last for centuries to come. But look at her, girl. She is truly suffering. You can stop it. You can ease her pain. Be a force of compassion. As my father wished that my brothers and I would be. Do not compare what you gain with inaction with what is correct. Yes, thank you. With a calm mind, Naruto quickly began to write down the seals that he had casually discussed with Kabuto in all his conversations and plans. Removing this seal, it hadn't been a priority, but as he worked to undo it, he realized that there should have been fact. Orochimaru's sins were not his to pay, nor even Kabuto to repent, but it was Wrong to leave him alone in this world, and Naruto was pretty sure that he was the only one in the village who could have fixed it. That's why Hanko suffered, and that was his fault would begin by amplifying the strength of the original containment seal. He had to adjust to her spasms, as his clones held her down. She had just lost her senses from the pain, and had been reduced to shuddering on the ground. He activated the additional containment, and she pulled loudly and her body he stopped. She so softly before her breathing evened out. When she lost consciousness she relaxed, and his clones moved her to a more comfortable position, and rested her head on his lap. To better work on the seal, Naruto would have considered stopping him there, but the Kurama's words and his own guilt had made it impossible. He was removing this cursed seal no matter the cost. He began to create the required sealing array when he realized that Sundai, Kakashi and a few others were suddenly behind him. It seemed that the exam had finished as enough. Naruto didn't hesitate when Kakashi rested a hand on his shoulder, but continued with his work. Naruto resisted the urge to scold his older brother for touching him while he was drawing an unfinished seal. "I'm helping her, I'm getting that seal off her back," was placed by Chimaru from San Antunan. That hoarse voice could only be Ibiki. Naruto had only encountered him as the Konoha agent, so he didn't expect him to realize that he wasn't a real shinobi, but he was almost disappointed that the torture leader interrogation wouldn't have realized who he really was. Oh, not only did he have a soft spot for his little protege, it seemed like he had sponsored and encouraged Hanko for this exam, and was wary of the repercussions of Naruto's actions against Orochimaru's work. His respect for the man grew up. "That's why I'm not a Chunin, and I know if this was the work of Totsan I wouldn't dare, but I should be able to handle this." Naruto felt his disbelief even Hyuzen's, but smiled when Kakashi slowly let go of them and took a step back when the Hokage spoke. Was not for Naruto's benefit. "Let's see what he has in store." Naruto felt pride flow through him, and his smile grew wider when he began to write. This would be his truth raw test, not only as a sealer, but also as a jounin. Began by taking 5 minutes to observe the seal, time he would never have had in the field. The seal was evil, and anyway, a work of art took advantage of the negative emotion of the user and had other purposes. It was violent, twisted. Naruto's disdain for Orochimaru grew, and thoughts of what exactly he would like to do to the snake summoner were only met with a pleasant growl from Kurama. Listening to stories, it was one thing to feel Kabuto's fear, and Hyuin's regret it was another thing. This was almost too much. As the seconds passed, he became more and more frustrated. The seal mechanisms were all wrong. It was just an upgrade seal that housed something that was more like his own dead repurposal than anything else. Kurama realized. She realized what she was missing before she could piece it together, and was growling in pure shock and disgust. Her soul, he has implanted his soul inside Orochimaru's soul, or a fragment of it inside another person without her consent. Disgusting, degrading, an act born from the shinobi world. His mind was filled with possibilities. The soul had to be erased to remove the mark that he knew if he expelled it, it would perish, it would form a weak body, or attach itself to another host. Another Orochimaru would threaten anyone in the village, everyone except him. It housed the nine-tailed fox. Its seal could contain the shadow of the Sannin. No matter how twisted it may be, it is the only path we can take right now. I will handle it from within. Naruto-kun, I am proud of you. Naruto's eyes narrowed as he worked. There was no specific seal for this. The transfer of a soul from a host to a seal. Jinchuriki would have to improvise. That was his favorite part of sealing. Be careful. You almost killed us the last time you improvised. I got it, big baby. Yes. 5 minutes of dissecting a seal. It was a long time, taking 30 minutes to remove a series of seals. It was a lifetime. When he completed the last brushstroke, he took a deep breath that he didn't know he needed and allowed his senses to expand to their usual strength and range. He realized that most of the os had been removed from the field and only a medical ninja remained hovering over a worried and stubborn Kurenai. It seemed that Hanko had more people who really cared about her than she realized. She closed her brush again and sighed. Someone must have kept Hano slept while working. A subtle genjutsu from Kakashi that wouldn't have interfered with his sealing was his best guess. I must admit Naruto-kun had never seen a seal like this. Naruto chuckled sheepishly at the unasked question. Honestly, Gigi, I just figured it out. Ibiki's concern and distrust. Pissed like the sun took a step and opened his mouth, but was frozen in place by a quick glance from Hyuin. The old Kage sighed and did his best to review his students' work. Well, I must confess it seems like it will work. You intend to reseal it within the Yondai seal? He could have nodded, but he had already made up his mind not to lie to his guardian again, and not when the well-being of one of his shinobi was at stake. There is a fragment of Orochimaru inside the seal. That's what transferred me. Is the only way. Any other box would have denied Naruto. Not only was he not a true master of the seal, he was still not a true shinobi, and he was a Jinchuriki. Any chance of damaging one of the most powerful weapons in a village was a terrible idea. Naruto knew this. Kurama had taught him so much, but Hyuin Sarutobi just smiled with faith in his student and nodded his head. Do it. The seal activated, and Naruto watched as a dark and sickly purple chakra began to flow from the neck. Onko's burning towards her stomach was similar to a condensed negative emotion. When he entered her chakra network, she gritted her teeth in pain and rested her forehead on Anko's. Kurama's chakra quickly overcame the bee intrusion and decomposed it, preventing it from fusing. Inside the seal, this will take time, Naruto-kun, but I will strive to reduce his chakra so that his influence does not work at your whim. However, be careful, this will only end when you have completely absorbed every last trace of his chakra. I understand, thank you. He sighed in relief when the process was completed, and she was very happy at the fact that Anko's neck was not marked by the snake mark. She looked at those who were watching silently and smiled as tears fell down her face. I saved her, Torin, and Fu worked quite well together. The benefits of Yamanaka's jutsus with Labum's special technique had been a great blessing to Danzo in the past. After Konoha took over, he sent them to the field. After evaluating their loyalty, they both understood, of course, they had been Danzo's personal bodyguards. Of all the root agents, they were the most likely to still resemble the Warhawk's loyalty. The fact that Konoha was even younger than Torin said a lot about his ability and skill as a shinobi. He even seemed to have the respect of Danzo. However, by making use of his abilities, he did more for the benefit of Konoha than removing them, as Konoha had done with more insubordinate agents. That said, even the emotionless pair had some apprehension about their current mission: locate Rasi Jinchuriki of the Yam in the middle of the Earth Country. To get so far to the farmlands of Iowa had not been easy, and yet they had managed it. They had posed as young rice merchants, and so far it had worked wonders. The Torin bugs had spread out incredibly to find any trace of their enemy and had found his trail only to realize that he had found them. Trun and Fu worked quite well together, and that was the only thing that kept them alive as they fled from the angry Jinchuriki. Trun cursed as Fu knocked him out of the way of a drop of lava. You've sent the message to HQ, of course. How I look was cut off as the ground erupted around him and magma blocked his escape. Rasi's form slowly walked towards them. The lava. It was dripping from his body now. Why don't you guys sit still for a moment and tell me who sent you, and what do you want? Trun gritted his teeth as Fu sighed. Defeated, Fu sat up and used his training to look emotionless. Trun wasn't as experienced as him. I wasn't. He had stopped all emotional conditioning. He was forced to contain his terror with every ounce of self-control he had. Our master sent us to find you. He wishes to speak with you too. Rosie snorted and crossed his arms. The older shinobi had red hair and an unamused expression on his face. He wasn't wearing the traditional attire of a shinobi. His armor was more consistent with the attire of the warling Clan's era than anything else. He owned big chance no to Son Goku. Trun almost bit his tongue when he realized that he and Zuu were held in the air by their necks, almost pressed against the lava wall. Trun couldn't help but marvel at the display of power, the control over the lava to not burn them, even from that distance. It was terrifying. The man was a monster. How does he know we don't know that name? But he would like to talk to you. He said that he and Kurama had something that would give you a favor and a deal. Fu spoke much better than Torin, because if it had been him who had opened his mouth, he was pretty sure he would have. Torin was sorry, not having been benched. Konoha, she was crazy. Danzo wouldn't have thrown away her assets so blatantly. They were going to die here because the kid had overestimated his hand, and Rasi was going to call his bluff. And well, 1 week, that's all I'm going to give him. Trun and Funo waited to thank the kind Jinchuriki therein. Naruto stood at attention next to Karina, and in the Hokage office, they had bandaged her and repaired her tendons. Naruto had apologized, and Kakashi had scolded him for using that technique against his fellow shinobi, but Karina had ignored the pervert's warnings and hugged him. She kindly smiled at him and praised him for the fight. She was pretty cool. He liked being around her. He could feel her nervousness while they were there, and he almost envied her. He knew what it had been, the verdict of the exam, the moment he felt his Jiji's presence behind him on the field. That still didn't calm his own nerves when the Hokage of Konohagakure stood up and smiled at them. That was quite a sight. Kurenai, I wish to congratulate you and the Hay8's performance. Unfortunately, due to the first exam, you and A8 will not be promoted to fully participate in this exam. Naruto made him caw, sensing her disappointment and embarrassment. She had desperately wanted to move through the ranks. Well, if the old man would hurry up. And not if he left her hanging, she wouldn't feel so bad. He realized that her annoyance must have been evident in her height when the old man chuckled and showed her a certificate. But your promotion to Toka Betsujounen is more than deserved. Kurenai smiled widely, and a little she cried, thank you Akama. And what about Anko Ch-sen? After much choice, she has also been promoted to Tokov Jounen. You can tell her the news if you wish. If it was possible. Her smile only grew wider, and she bowed deeply. Thank you Akama Uzumaki. Naruto, her smile disappeared, and an irrational nervousness invaded him once again. He knew he was going to be promoted. Incomplete. It was impossible to surprise him, however he feared the answer anyway. Congratulations and proud to your sensei. Hereby you are Mbredo Jounen of with Akure. You have earned it. That is impossible to deny. Naruto cried. The tears threatened to overflow when his role model, the closest thing to a father, praised him, and the hidden message underneath, that only he would be able to understand. Itachi would be so proud of you, son. He had to wait until Kurenai left to tell Anko the news, as the Anbu were suddenly dismissed before he could run forward and Hugged the man who had completely blessed his life. Thank you Gigi, I love you. I love you too, love Naruto-kun. You have made us very proud. In that moment, he felt truly happy and focused. He was on the right path, and the path forward was clear to him. Now he was a tried and true shinobi of the leaf. It was time to get serious. Anku opened his eyes after making sure Kurenai was the only one in the room. She was in a hospital room. Apparently waking up after combat was always terrifying. Uncertainty and disorientation were dangerous. That's why recovering patients were left alone whenever it was possible. Kurenai must have been very worried about staying. Hey, how did the promotion go? She smiled as Kurenai smiled exasperatedly. You know Anko, it's good to see that your optimism is still strong. Anko smiled at her best and only friend. Yeah, well, I noticed from your face if you didn't get promoted, you would be a piece of. At this moment they both laughed and Kurenai slithered towards Adante and took his hand. You know, you really did your best in the end. I didn't know you could summon such a big snake. It's not about the size, Karina and Chan, but thanks for appreciating his thickness. He laughed out loud when Karina and hit her lightly. I'm serious Anko, you deserve to be promoted. I did it. Jay incomplete yes, and he didn't play Betsu for both of us. Hanko smiled, but he didn't have his usual edge. He felt hollow. Half a step she knew she could have given a better performance if that boy's memories of their fight came back to her immediately, and she moaned. Me complained Jay incomplete owes me something. Ango regardless of when I put my hands on him. Anko, her friend's worried tone made her looking at her. Something in Karina's voice, and it was wrong. It was hard to tell if it was good or bad. Yes, what is good? Yes, Naruto-kun was promoted to J incomplete, but Naruto-kun, that kid is the reason we didn't pass the first Anko. At the end of the fight between the two of you, your seal acted, and then his blood ran cold and he gritted his teeth. Who saw him tried to kill me? No Anko. He took it away. The room was dominated by silence, and then Anko took away Kurenai's hand. Don't fuck with me with that Anko, it's gone now, and they said it was permanent. I tried to take it off. I cut the skin it was on. It was underneath. It can't be removed. But her friend was crying now, and she handed her a small mirror. Look, just look. Her hands were shaking when she grabbed the mirror. I didn't know it scared her more when she lifted it up to her neck, realizing that Kurenai was playing a cruel joke on her, or she was gone. All she saw was her pristine empty neck. Hers was free, and she had been unconscious for what would have been one of the moments happiest in his life. Where is he? Where do I find him? Or I will hit him, or I will kiss him, and I will do it now. So stop looking at me like that and tell me where I can find Naruto Uzumaki immediately. They better have given him Jounin for this. He didn't even notice who had started to cry before Kurenai laughed and started crying harder when her friend hugged her. She realized that it was a sunny day outside. She had forgotten how bright the sun could be. It had been a long time since she had noticed it. The sky was so blue he didn't know whether to laugh or cry, so he sat there in his best friend's arms. He did both. Naruto trained like no other ninja before him. Every day he made 200 clones and sent them to predetermined study areas. Kurama and the Hokage had talked quite in depth about the limits of his schedule and how much he should or should not push himself. Naruto could easily make 1000 clones a day, but to get the maximum effect, Kurama and Sarutobi had forced him to stick with 200 clones a day, who each trained for 6 hours, 100 hours of memories a day, plus their own memories piled on top. About a year and a half of training in 2 days. Now, in all fairness, in some areas, it was not the same. Muscle memory was almost completely lost in translation, so he himself wielded his taijutsu almost every day. Most of his clones focused on chakra control. Ninjutsu Konoha's libraries had been flooded with clones of Naruto endowed, and due to the frequency with which they were in, they had begun a recent social trend of increasing the popularity of reading. The town as a whole had become more literate, and book sales had started to skyrocket. Of course, some clones were missing. The Yamanaka were getting upset. Naruto couldn't turn off his empathy. That was by design, of course, but Kurama even admitted that it might have been a good idea to silence him from time to time. The Minwalker clan had heard about one of their own, who had the unfortunate pleasure of being in Naruto's Jounin exam, and they were out to catch him, and he was still steadfastly protecting his identity. But there were 200 shadow clones in the village every day most of the time. They were at Lockage's personal training camp, but the Yamanaka had begun to realize that the libraries were full of empaths, so they realized that they were shadow clones, and well, if a clone was cornered, he was exploited. The Yamanaka were proud, and apparently they were somewhat offended that the Hokage had a shinobi who could defeat his own ninjutsus. They felt threatened. Naruto completely understood how they were reacting. It was just annoying that he had to constantly be on guard for them. He had grown enormously. Kabuto placed him in the mid-range without any of Kurama's chakra. He was 7 years old and already a little assassin. Naruto was proud of how far he had come, especially for having been an Anbu before he finally felt that he had earned his position in the village. Now he just had to make a name for himself. He was currently working on his taijutsu when he felt the sudden surge of memories of a clone on the outskirts. Someone was coming. His clones immediately began to dissipate in clouds of smoke, and he put on his silliest smile and turned around when the intruder came to his senses, only to realize she realized who Anador was. So she was still somewhat bandaged, but she limped towards him quite determinedly. Her emotions were a whirlwind, and Naruto felt himself freeze when she walked towards him. She knelt down and looked him in the eyes. Naruto, she leaned towards Dante and looked at him. He hugged. Thank you. She hugged him tightly, and he didn't know what to do. Slowly he hugged her back, but he didn't know how to react. How you did it. She pulled away and looked him in the eyes. Her brown eyes were watery and red from crying. How did I do what? She frowned. He frowned, and his eyes scanned him for clues. It seems like he had learned a lot under Iviki. You know what I'm asking? How did you get it off? He sighed and looked away awkwardly. I can't tell you how he knew what to do, but I like to seal. That's enough. He was scared, confused, and frustrated. If he didn't have her empathy, he hadn't detected even a bit of her inner confusion in the soft smile he was giving her. Yeah, boy, that's good, thank you, I can't wait to see what you have. Sorry. She laughed and shook him. Bear like Itachi used to do. You can't do a miracle for me and then run away, boy. Someone has to teach you how to enjoy being a jounin, and I've decided to take care of you. He almost grimaced. Well, doesn't that seem strange to you? I mean, shouldn't you be your senpai? He paled when he realized what he had done, when he saw her snake smile, and she put an arm over his shoulders and pulled him tightly to her side. Oh, the little boy already wants a hot eye to be Suie. That's how it is, and I'm not too young to think about having a girlfriend. Damn straight guy. I know I'm sexy, but we have more important things to worry about, like you helping me and Kurin get our next Joun exam. You know how to get inside information. You made a joke about that last one. You owe us, boy, and I'll make sure you pay. He groaned as she picked him up and began walking with him toward the town. He hadn't realized what he had invited into her orderly life. He was walking like chaos, and it looked like he had decided he liked her now, but. I'm busy. No, he sang childishly. I know how many shadow clones you can make. You might be busy. He paled once again. She knew there would be no denying her now. Just get used to it, Naruto-kun. Now we are going to be best friends. We are part of Konoha. It's time to celebrate. The agent Konoha stood in front of the last messenger. Kabuto was at his side as his personal bodyguard. He trusted no one in Rod and was Naruto's last line of defense against betrayal. He wore a snake mask and was called Snake People at Naruto's request. A little on the nose, Kabuto was worried that Danzo already knew his identity and was just waiting for his moment. Master Kono to Sama, we have heard news from Tarunu. They have located R. Ross and have delivered his message. He expects it in 3 days. Thank you. Goodbye. The messenger. He nodded and disappeared from sight, and Naruto sighed and dropped into his seat. Rosie didn't give us much time. Apparently it's a trap. If you arrive, you will be worn out and exhausted from the triple Onel. Or do you know, right? Yes, however you are still adamant about this. I have to talk to him, especially if he is really going to give me a chance. Take a squad with you, it wouldn't delay me. I will meet Futaro and they will be my guard. How will Naruto Uzumaki Arawa justify on his own? Naruto, he smiled, and Kabuto's blood boiled. He always smiled so when I thought I had done something smart. Kakashi let me know that Iwa and Kumo will have another summit. It's the perfect time to go to Iwa. Kabuto knew that the only way he could convince Naruto that he was not playing with his friendship to beg him not to do it. He stood in front of him and put his hands on the boy's shoulders. He looked into his eyes. Naruto, that was when a snake came out of the shadows and climbed up to him. They both looked down. It was white with red eyes and in its jaws there was a note. At that moment, the roles were reserved. Naruto's hands hooked into hers as she walked away. You don't have to leave, Kabuto. Hun, you're not ready yet, please. The irony of the situation was almost too much for him as he smiled helplessly. He had to go. They both had to leave each other when it was the worst thing he could do. We have to do this, Naruto-kun. It's okay, I'll be back if you do. You promise? The boy's eyes hardened as his words from when they first met came back. You can't break a promise to him, and I promise you that I won't break any of mine. It's a promise, Naruto-kun, a promise for life. Kabuto was watching that night as Naruto left the village. The copycat Kakashi had accompanied him to the village gates. To see him off, Kabuto knew that someone would have done it, someone who could move freely in the village that was not restricted to the shadows, someone who lived in the light of the world. Stood still when Kakashi looked at him. The Anbu commander couldn't tell who was masked and in the shadows of the rooftops, but he closed his eye as he smiled and nodded. It seemed like he didn't care who was. Kabuto knew why he was there and was grateful. Well, at least it seemed like Kakashi didn't mind breaking the rules. If it was for Naruto's sake, Kabuto, he wondered how far the boy's attack would go. He didn't realize he was still thinking about Naruto until he was halfway to Son. He was worried and there was nothing he could do. He had forgotten how difficult it was to take care of the Shisui people. He cursed as he once again burned his hands serving tea. The rehabilitation was a slow process, but one that had been pursued with fervor. Had been known as Shunin no Shisui o Shisui of the body. Flicker Shunin was one of the peaks of in precision. A title like that, it required dexterity and precision in the control of one's own body. How low I had reached, where boiling tea was served with my hand resting and without taking the cup completely. I was in a cabin on the outskirts of the town. A safe house. All the windows were boarded up, although they were not He cared a lot, he was constantly in the dark, that was the worst part, always living in pure blackness. The colors of his memories were so vivid he didn't even know what color his clothes were. The Uchiha were not made for blindness, it would drive the weakest of them. Mad Shizu Uchiha was not weak, that's what he told himself. Kabilo complained as was customary for an Uchiha, but he was constantly working on his rehabilitation. Konoha-sama had been quite useful in that sense. It had provided him with several alternatives that would allow him to be back in shape. In shape to fight a genjutsu, to place himself also, that would allow him to see sound. If his opponents realized how he was seeing, then they could use loud noises against him. Good, but not perfect. A chakra technique that included sending pulses of chakra to his environment. To get an echolocation, expensive and not very subtle. No, he hadn't found the right fit, but he was constantly working to try to find something that worked. He gave up early, and it cost him his clan and his eyes. He had promised not to give up ever again. He didn't. I would fail. He cursed when he accidentally knocked his teacup off the table, and it broke on the floor. Black cape with red clouds, nail polish and wide hats with bells and ribbons, not very subtle, but when you only had the best of the best wearing them. Itachi guessed that he thought so. He had paired up with Viwa, who was some kind of jester, a loudmouth, the wearer of the Kubikurabacho over executioner's blade. The idiot was using him in the middle of the town. Itachi was just waiting to be noticed so he could escape himself, not to sabotage any of the organization's missions. But if his partner wanted out of idiocy, he wouldn't stop him. He almost wished Naruto was around here to see if Via was looking to start a fight in the village he had deserted from. He blinked. And he had to take a second to catch his breath. That had been the first time in a few months that he had allowed himself to think about his brother. He had dedicated himself to the job Madara gave him, and he was content to bide his time until Sasuke was strong enough to avenge the Uchiha clan. When his attention returned to the present, it was Awa smiling widely at a figure walking down the street towards them, the Yondaime Mizukage. The Guru Karatachi Shiriki del Sandy. Good Itachi-san, it seems that we can see if we are strong enough to face a Jinchuriki. As the leader says, come, we are leaving. Itachi did not wait and cast a quick genjutsu to hide his escape. He knew he could not fool the Kage for a long time, but he had no intention of fighting in the very center of Kiri. It would not be better to fight among the trees even if it was full of fog. He would not die here, yet Naruto would be devastated. He was not happy. He was a simple man of simple pleasures. Sitting in front of he was the Sandai Tsuchikage Inoki of both scales, were discussing the current political climate and the finer points of the alliance with no Kumo, had thought they would have similar ideas on how to proceed against the threat of Kohen, but Inoki seemed perfectly fine with scheduling the summit. After the summit they had been reus for more than a year. With no results, he decided that it didn't matter which nation he was talking to with Oiwa. Any Sundaime was a pain in his ass. I think we should call the meeting here. Raj Dono, we have already covered enough for now. Your accommodation as you like it. Yes, Skik Dono, the room is fine. When will we meet next time? I hope to finish our conversations and decide on some course of action. I am tired of waiting. Very well, next time we talk, we will finalize our plans. Very well. He got up from his seat and left the camera with Derry at his side. What news, Derry? His right hand sensed his frustrations and went straight to the important details. We believe that Iwa is going to go ahead with the plan to attack Konoha. They are gathering a force of over 100. It seems that Inoki was unable to deter the daimyo of inaction. They will commit and help us in our plans. Inoki, it is smart. If he wanted to fully commit, I would send 10 times more shinobi. He was ready. He and I will be the focal point of the Kumo task force, with the Iwa Jinchuriki as his main asset. Yes, but well, I have some information. Whose validity I cannot determine. Oh yes, it comes from one of our men who had been imprisoned in Konoha until this moment. A detainee had a feeling that he would not like what he was going to say. And what message does he bring from the Konoha prisons? That he is going to lose one of his Jinchuriki. He grunted and hit a nearby wall. He became Aiko's Yell and Deru, and they were met with the terrified screams of a young couple on their honeymoon. Deru stayed behind to placate the couple and the hotel staff, shocked and angry, and burst into his room barking at his shinobi. He had to verify this information. Sia could not bring his full power to this invasion. Then it would be Kumo who would suffer the biggest losses. It seems that the side and reach of the old monkey, they were far away. He still remembered the threats made against his own Jinchuriki. If Konoha was going to start taking back the tailed beasts, then the rest of the 5 great nations and the lesser villages would rise up and protest. If they took the 4 tails, then these plans would have to be scrapped. However, it wouldn't mean the end, it just meant he would have to be smarter. Naruto walked towards the clearing and felt the magma cooking below. He hadn't stopped running for almost 3 days, and his guards were exhausted from the journey. He was madly happy for their stamina, Uzumaki and Kurama's influence, or else he would never have been able to achieve it. It led him to a section of the forest that had been leveled and replaced by a layer of obsidian floor. Standing in front of him was Rossi. It couldn't be anyone else. If he felt the and well the clear as day. Good morning, thank you for knowing me. I am Naruto Uzumaki Jinchuriki of Kurama. The nine-tailed fox. Naruto felt the peak of Rossy's distrust, but he walked towards Adam anyway. Two titans were kept separated from their villages in a meeting that was a betrayal at best. I'm Rossy, but I guess you know whatever you have to say, save it. Goku and I have thought things through, and before we say more we want to see where you two are. Naruto gulped when Rossy's body was suddenly invaded by a vicious red chakra, and two tails grew from his back. The AI Jinchuriki smiled a bloody smile and spoke with a voice that could only be described as demonic. Well, come on boy, let's see the strength of the Jinchuriki. And the nine tails. The lava began to shoot out of the ground, and Naruto screamed as he dodged a heavy goal that was intended to separate his head from his body. I thought you said that would be willing to talk. The damn monkey was always a little unpredictable. He's the type to talk with his fists. How was he supposed to know that he wanted his ship to fight a child? Come back. Naruto jumped back when Rossy opened his mouth and fired a lava flow towards him. This was not going as planned. I wish Kabuto was having a better time than him. Tell me, Kabuto, what do you know about Sacer and the Red Sands? Katsuki. Kabuto smiled and tried to contain his panic. He could do this. He could lie to Orochimaru and get away with nothing. Oh gods, he was going to die today. It wasn't even time for lunch. He still dodged Rossy's punch, but found little satisfaction in doing so. The ground beneath his feet was rising in temperature, and he could feel the turbulent lava beneath him. Naruto tried ignoring him, while Rosie pressed her assault. The four-tailed Jinchuriki was in a layer of Yumi's chakra. Engaging in hand-to-hand combat against him was out of the question. Threat to his opponent. Naruto knew about 24 elemental or offensive ninjutsu, but none of them were strong enough to take on Rossy. He had spent most of his time building his foundation and mastering simpler ninjutsu against a normal shinobi. Naruto would have had hundreds of options at his fingertips in the face of this threat. A furious Jinchuriki in command of a weapon as offensive as magma itself. There was only one option open to him. In how many tails can you force me? Kurama. Immediately 3. But it will be incredibly painful and dangerous. None of us will be in control. Naruto. Slowly more tails will appear until Rossy is dead, and then who knows how long it will take for your rage to dissipate. I don't see how we have such a choice in the matter. I can't touch it, and it doesn't look like it's going to stop anytime soon. If I were to start with 2, there is a chance he will maintain control in a third tail. It will be a bet you can lose. Naruto. Do it. Naruto's palm rose to catch Rossy's punch. A light red film of chakra bubbled from his hand and marked his body. Two tails sprouted behind him, and he could feel his bloodlust increase. The power of the Kyuubi no Kitsune washed over him, and it was hard not to smile. Rosie didn't hide his own animalistic smile and chuckled. The monkey says he's glad you decided to show your power. We were getting bored just making you dodge, boy. This is not my power, Roshan, but I appreciate you giving us Kureami the chance to show your power. Naruto tightened his grip as he twisted and turned, knocking Rossy into the ground behind him. His foot lashed out against his enemy's neck, but only found land on his descent. Rossy was fast, and when the two collided the wind tore the obsidian beneath their feet. Cracks began to form, and the air heated up as the magma below was slowly revealed. Naruto did not. He paid attention to her as hot tears fell down his cheeks. His empathy increased every time he used Kurama's chakra, and as he bonded with Rosie in a way he had only done with a few others. Yusen Kakashi Kabuto Hanko Itachi. Rossy was the next person who Naruto felt he understood. Rossy was proud, cynical, cautious, tired of the shinobi system. He respected strength and also had a strong sense of justice. The veteran of the Rogue village had no hatred in his heart for Konoha. For him, he was testing him. That being said, if Naruto didn't comply with his expectations, so the Jinchuriki was not afraid to kill him. Naruto was not safe, but his situation was not hopeless either. It was a battle of expectations. Jinchuriki had not faced each other like this since the last great shinobi war. Naruto struggled to keep his taijutsu style in the middle of the swirling desire to hit him. It was a constant war between his instincts and Rossy, a battle on two fronts. Rossy seemed to have it easier. Rosie wasn't giving him room to step back to breathe. Naruto was struggling. The power was amazing, but uncontrolled. He could feel more of it seeping into him through his seal, a burning sensation emanating from his navel that was quickly becoming a dangerous distraction. His senses fighting for his attention. The sounds began to fade, his attention focused on the fight, and his vision began to tunnel with increasing intensity. Harder to pay attention to his surroundings. His vision was beginning to blur. Red. The red was consuming. As you looked at it was hot, very hot, hot everywhere, hot inside him. Fire, blood, blood, iron. He tasted blood and iron. Screaming. He heard screams, screams outside, and screams inside. He was screaming and roaring. He saw his enemy, the monkey and man, in front of him. He heard a voice screaming inside his head. Two voices, his voices, but he didn't care. He fought harder than he was. He didn't care if the red hot rock touched him. It would simply wash away from his chakra, his power. The stone melted from the heat, and their battle dragged on. Because of the liquid stone he was also hurt. His enemy was strong and fast, but the more angry he got, the stronger the monkey became, and the man began to defend himself, to retreat. Halves did not have a partner to strengthen them, not animals, only men with more days of shiny metal. They waved their arms, and as he roared and swung to destroy them, he heard a third voice, one that he had almost forgotten from his memories. Why does a shinobi fight? Naruto the village Itachi sense Kakure the village hidden in the leaves the leaf symbol the symbol on their heads they were Konoha ninjas he was Konoha nin, his claws stopped gripping their throats and released them he didn't flinch, although he could smell their fear his hands had marked his necks with his corrosive chakra, no enemies friends, and so he began to remember. Though he was agent Konoha the Kyuubi Jinchuriki Naruto Uzumaki shinobi of the leaf roared and felt the wind sending a gale to the clouds above, he could feel the cloak around him, as he was struggling to control himself very well boy move on, I thought we almost lost you there, it was the hardest thing he had ever done, even now the urge to lose himself in so much power, and let it flow through him. Resonated with him just let go seemed to whisper let go, he forced himself to stay still, and finally felt the cloak dissipate Jadon, and looked at Torin and Zuu, they were standing still motionless loyal apparently how are you both okay sir we apologize, we thought we could help you, he was surprised to realize that they thought they would be punished more for intervening, they did not realize that. They were the only reason why he had not been lost he was lost in hatred precisely what he was trying to fight calmly, I will find some way to reward them both when we return excellent job, he saw the surprise on their faces of both, and would have smiled if he didn't feel so guilty, that's the way it was he turned around, so he could look at Ross the hardest thing he had ever done, even now the urge to lose himself in so much power, and let it flow through him. Resonated with him just let go seemed to whisper let go, he forced himself to stay still, and finally felt the cloak dissipate Jadon, and looked at Torin and Zuu, they were standing still motionless loyal apparently how are you both okay sir we apologize, we thought we could help you, he was surprised to realize that they thought they would be punished more for intervening, they did not realize that. They were the only reason why he had not been lost he was lost in hatred precisely what he was trying to fight calmly, I will find some way to reward them both when we return excellent job, he saw the surprise on their faces of both, and would have smiled if he didn't feel so guilty, that's the way it was he turned around, so he could look at Rossi, the older man was standing there without a chakra. Cloak with his arms crossed, I passed your test Roshan the first boy speaks Naruto almost groaned after that he was exhausted. And just wishing he could lie down sleep and cry, it seemed like Elan wanted him to have exhausted himself, when he let out his rant to get the upper hand well, Naruto would give him that comfort well, but him sitting up and sit down, he squatted down on the hard stone beneath him he grimaced as he was nearly burned. His struggle from just a few meters away had heated the stone for dozens of meters. Beyond what it seemed, his throat was tied along with everything else and burned from excessive exposure to Kurama's chakra. It seemed that the brief and sweet would have to be enough I bet that's what Rossi wanted anyway I want you to defect from Iwa you can come to Konoha, but if you have any doubts about it, it'll be enough to leave on your own, I can offer you protection in one way or another, if you want I want to gather all the Biju and their Jinchuriki together the world has used them as pawns for too long I would. See us all united as a family and maybe reform the shinobi system that's a crazy boy it's impossible no it's not good it's not impossible think about it before the Uzumaki myth there had never been Jinchurikis before Konoha there had been no villages it is totally possible to make a change it would simply be hard Roshan but if you fight for us I will fight for you I give you my word and I cannot take back my word that is mine Indo Rosie he looked at him and Naruto gave him the courtesy of not expressing all his thoughts. Kabuto insisted that Naruto not do so when he had the chance to convince people without making them believe he could read minds. Apparently it had baffled Kabuto a little when they first met. Why? Now Iwa and Kumo are going to ally to fight against Konoha so you want me to fight against my own village to protect yours no, you don't have to join Konoha and I wouldn't ask you to fight against your own village, but if the others join us they could fight against, just like I hope you never ask me to do it fight against Konoha, you are not a weapon I are not people either and the beings we carry deserve to be treated like people too, don't you think I will be hunted Inoki won't be so willing to let me escape, so I can protect you, Naruto Mantu he silently made his eye contact Rosie was a better fighter, much more in tune with Goku, than Naruto's seal allowed him to be with Kurama, this was the hardest sell by far of this arrangement, I will show you I have some matters to attend to here and then you can come back with me, and I will show you some hiding places where they will never find you where you don't have to be apart from either town, I will take care of you until there is a safe place for us, where we don't have to fight please Roshan Rossi Rio, but he kept his seriousness he didn't waver in the face of Rossi's skepticism, it would do no good to be shaken so easily, not when everything depended on convincing Rossi that leaving was the best option at this moment, I mean it Roshan do you know what will happen if you stay here if you help in this campaign against Konoha open war, the Sundai May the god of shinobi knows about the conversations between Iwa and Kumosuna, is our ally you really want to be used as a weapon, again risking your life just to kill a shinobi for the Sole reason that they are from another village, fight until they kill you, and then have Son Goku just lock himself and someone else, someone who may not be as respectful or caring as you are with him. What business do you have here? He met Rossi's eyes head on. Only brutal honesty would work to ensure his friendship. I'm going to decimate Iwa's invasion force. Rossi raised an eyebrow and smiled. You're going to die, do that, and what happened to not killing shinobi just because they're from another village? Huh, that was just a line. I won't die. I promise I'm not as trained as a Jinchuriki and as I am as a shinobi, and I don't want to do it, but if I can finish the fight with one round, then that has to count for something. It's hypocritical, boy. I really don't see any other way. I don't like Roshan. And I hope that by doing this I can stop any more fights. I hope I will anyway. Why are you trying so hard? What do you gain from this? I can make my friend Rosario happy. And then he sighed deeply. Naruto could tell he was deeply conflicted. The Yambi Jinchuriki was a veteran from the last war Shinobi had fought against Konoha. He killed Kohin Shinobi, and if he had friends in Iwa, some of them probably died against Konoha, but Rosie was disillusioned with the life of the village. Inoki saw him and his fellow Jinchuriki Han Solo as active weapons. He was tired of it. Naruto understood how he felt. He also felt guilty that he was using his feelings to manipulate him in this way, but he received his gifts for a reason, to use them for this purpose, to stop the wars and protect the Biju. What would you do if the Jinchuriki would deny you if they opposed your goal? Naruto frowned. He could sense what Rossi wanted to know. It wouldn't be good to be optimistic. There was a good chance that any number of Jinchuriki felt more loyalty to their village than to each other or to the Biju. It was like that. Naruto, he could feel that he would never willingly betray the Raikage. He would have to be honest, then he would have to free the Biju from them. If they are determined to keep the Biju subjugated and imprisoned, I will kill them. He was not proud of it, and yet he could see Rossi's approval from everyone anyway. For the first time since they had spoken, it seemed that Rossi had a certain affection for Goku, more than he had imagined. Show me what you can do. Trun Boy and Fu stood on either side of him in silence, ready to leave. Very well, follow me. The four of them disappeared of the rocky field, and this is how the socio-economic design of the warring clans of the final era led to the formation of shinobi villages and inspired the first shinobi war, and how Tobirama's vision in Ju of the creation of Jutsu and seals spearheaded the first Konoha War World Cup victory. The class was silent, and even the Irukam Mino structure was giving him a strange look. This usually happened every time he answered a question or gave a verbal report, and he could never understand why he always answered the question as completely as possible. Well, yes, but we won't talk about court village politics for a few months. Sai, you could have stuck to the basics of Nidame's background, but still good job. Some students laughed and Sai turned away, asked what Sense had said, and that was so funny. Thanks Iruka-sensei. That concludes my report on my hero Shinobi Tobirama. Enju Sa went to his seat. No one applauded. They were whispering quietly about the pale weirdo and talking about how annoying and desperate he was about to be a teacher's favorite, and alike he had deduced a while ago that most of the students were uneasy about him, and instead of trying to emulate him, he was content that his report was designed in a deep cover briefing. Iruka gave him another superficial glance before looking at the whispering and nervous class. It seemed that no one wanted to compete with their report, as boring as they whispered it was. What about you, Inada? The girl squealed, and Sa was proud of how she suppressed the impulse to scoff. The Hyuga heir was the meekest person he had ever met, exactly what contrary to his goal. Sai slowly looked at Sasuke Uchiha, seemed to be reading his textbook. He was a model student and a promising shinobi. It seemed that Konoha-sama had just as good instincts as Danzo-sama when it came to selecting future recruits. Why else would he have placed Sai in such a deep cover, with the sole purpose of observing and protecting the Uchiha heir? If he was not the future tough head of the clan, then he would have been a perfect candidate to kidnap and initiate within Rod M. Mio. Shin Naruto Uzumaki. The class ran out breath, and Sai felt his concentration shatter. The words that came out of his mouth were so unexpected that he had to listen to the frantic whispers around him to confirm what he had said. Naruto Uzumaki. Inada Hyuga knew Naruto Uzumaki and idolized him. How come he didn't? It was a surprise that Khan was worthy of such praise, but no one should have known about him. At least not a student at Mi Academy was saved. FRD a Kakamunning ninja. Everyone was whispering frantically, except the Uchiha Nara. All the students knew about Naruto Uzumaki, the Sarutobi neighborhood, the weird one their parents warned them to avoid. Some even knew his forbidden nickname, the demonic brat. None of the students knew what he had done to be so vilified, but they assumed it was justified. It seemed like none of them were willing to question opinions of her parents. The Hyuga struggled to continue, and Sai felt torn. Hinata continued with her report, crying in shame and frustration as her stuttering worsened, while her classmates laughed and mocked her. Eventually Iruka was forced to let her sit halfway from her report. Since she couldn't even utter a word, she sat silently in Her seat and hunched over she sobbed silently. Sai saw her attitude and shyness as an enormous weakness, but she was loyal to Oasama, she adored him enough to defy the ridicule of her peers. If this had been a report on the origin of hand sealing, and she had gotten one sentence wrong, it would have been closed after the first comment, but she had stood there for over 20 minutes, and only sat down. When told to do so that he did to most that wouldn't mean much, but from Hinata Hyuga that had been a statement, a line in the sand. No one else had witnessed or understood what had happened in that class today. But Sai was there, he saw an opportunity, a potential asset. Even if she didn't become a powerful shinobi, she was the heir to the Hyuga clan that made her a powerful player, and potentially one that with Oasama could easily control and manipulate. She sat down to watch some more youth reports of famous shinobi, and the cool thing is that they were her jutsus. Before class ended, Yin-Nat remained in her seat, while the others left. Sai stood up and walked towards her Hyugan. She flinched as if she had been hit and looked at him with red lavender eyes and a full face. Spot saw fear and apprehension on his face and knew that his next sentence would be important to the rest of their interaction. He had to show that he was different from the rest of the class. He had to make it clear that he wasn't like the others, that she could trust. He had to foster a relationship. He is also my hero. At first she didn't seem to react, she just stared at him. She didn't know what had prompted him to commit to her. This was completely outside the objectives of his mission. Perhaps it was his potential usefulness. Sane didn't dare to think it was, because with a singular shared interest, she now had more in common with him than with anyone else in the class. That fact had somehow overridden her disdain for his temperament. She continued to look at him, and he tried to smile. He felt a little forced, uncomfortable. But then she smiled softly as she sobbed. She started to cry again, and he was almost afraid he had made a mistake. Thank you, Seisan. But then her smile grew, the first time he had seen her really smile at someone else. Would you like to tell me more about how Uzumaki saved you? San Kakashi spent most of his time training or reviewing missions for Anbu in another life. He would have preferred to stay as captain and simply run missions with a team. Ro would probably have been forced to resign to be Naruto sensei, and if Itachi had completed his genocide, he would probably also be Sasuke sensei. In all honesty, he was happy that things had gone the way they had. Being here for Naruto had made him feel normal as any high-level shinobi could be. It was grounding to be a role model for a child, to see them grow up loving them and receiving that love times 10. Kakashi had never thought about having children of his own, but now if he found the right person he wouldn't mind retiring and starting a family if he survived. Of course, if he didn't, all the secrets and techniques of the attack clan would be passed on to Naruto. That wouldn't even be that bad, nor would his father have liked Naruto. They had a lot in common. No, he didn't regret all the times he had taken Naruto to the park, the times they had eaten together at Ichiraku, teaching him, training with him, talking about his parents when Naruto was a little younger, and his empathy manifested itself as nightmares while he slept. He calmed the upset young man with stories about his father's intellect and his mother's power, of their love for each other, the village, and from him, he had eventually obtained his old copy of the Tale of the Absolutely Bold Shinobi, and Naruto had fallen in love. Kakashi, he knew Jiraiya would be very pleased when he learned that fact in the future. That being said, Naruto had started to become more independent. Taking the Jounin exams made that impossible to ignore. He had done better than Kakashi, and Kakashi was a few years older. When he became a Jounin, he was proud of Naruto. Every positive influence in his life came from his decision to get involved in the care and guidance of the boy. That was the exact reason why he diligently combed the village for 3 months to find the raid headquarters had become a kind of Danzo. Training was smart, and the last base that Kakashi had saved Tenzo from had been dismantled and relocated. It had not been easy to find the new headquarters. It had been even more difficult to hide his search from anyone else. Kakashi had wanted to find out where he was. Naruto had been on the run as Agent Konoha, and Team Rosie had been wondering where his former senpai disappeared to when he was out of commission. Of course, spending his time locating his younger brother's hangout was quite normal and understandable. Finding the base far below of the Hyuga complex was quite ingenious. As long as no stray jutsus or flashes of chakra were fired, rot was literally hidden right under the nose, or well, the eyes of the village. The new base was improved, the security was quite tight and well controlled, well staffed as well. It took a few hours to make any progress on the base. However, Kakashi was pretty sure he now knew what Naruto had been doing recently. Sitting behind a desk that had pictures of the boy with those closest to him was all the proof Kakashi needed. Hiruzen, he had found a replacement for Danzo in Rot. Apparently the old man had gone behind his back and allowed Naruto to not only become even more entrenched in the politics of the village, but to become the leader of the most dangerous organization. This is what Naruto, he couldn't tell him what Yuen had been comfortable enough to leave in the dark. The Sundai may seem to think he could choose when and what to tell Kakashi about Naruto. Maybe the Hokage had forgotten who Kakashi was. He was the commander of the village. This kind of confidentiality It was unprecedented. He was supposed to be the second most knowledgeable shinobi aside from the advisors. From the way things seemed to be going, it seemed like Naruto had gladly taken that place. He would remind Iris in his position. He couldn't do anything less. When he was in game, Naruto's security finished inspecting the room and left a small scroll on the desk. It would be nice to let Naruto know that his security was not as it should be, and that he would also appreciate the ramen. When he had examined the security of the scroll, Itachi stared at Yagura Karatachi. The Yondaime Mizukage was short, very short gray hair that fell down the middle of his face. He wielded a large spear with 2 hooks on the end, and a large flower attached to the largest hook. He had a pink scar under his left eye. He looked at the two with the air of a cashier, with the confidence that he could defeat them and come out alive. His only advantage was that maybe he didn't know who Itachi was. I saw now he was aware of how reckless he had been before, and he seemed to regret it. I never thought he would. Would you dare to show your face in the village? Juzo didn't necessarily want to have a mission. Ligura the Mizukage looked at the 2 lifeless bodies of Sun turning and sneered, your actions betray your death wish. Juzo, I am ready and prepared to face you. Yay, immediately get ready. Bu at gulp next to Itachi. Well, there you are going to surprise him with your genjutsu, I guess. The next moment asked quickly when suddenly the trees around him were flooded with a mist that carried the foreboding power of a biju behind him. It was only thanks to his Sharingan that Itachi could see the red claws approaching his face. He jumped back, noticing that Bu had blocking the executioner's blade with his sword, now sporting a large wound that disconnected the upper third of the blade from the rest of his body. The swordsman cursed and dove behind a rock when a burst of chakra nearly tore his head from Itachi's body. He was in a hurry to help when the Jinchuriki appeared in front of him. 3 red tails emerged from a turtle shape, and he realized how in tune Yura was with his biju. They were working in perfect tandem. I am one of the first Jinchu to have perfect control, my demon. You realize your madness now. Uchiha Itachi did not deign to respond as he dodged a rapid avalanche of attacks from the Yondaime Mizukage's arms, legs and tails. Even his elongated jaws would seek to break Itachi's limbs in half. When they came to close Itachi, he frowned and quickly summoned a shadow clone. The instant it appeared, a large burst of fire erupted from his lips as the original Itachi was forced to block a blow from the crazed Kage. As Yagura was sent flying back, a movie coral began to grow and spread across his body. He could feel it growing from his clothes and his skin, where Yagura had landed his blow, and it was quickly taking over his entire body. Before he had a chance to think of any way to escape the living prison, Beilo reached out and cut the growth with his huge sword. That's Yagura's coral fist technique. It's important not to let him hit you, very important. Viwa's head turned, and Itachi saw him. See what it made Itachi panic. Yagura, he was on all fours. Balls of black and white chakra manifesting in front of his mouth, condensed into a single ole, and then Yagura's jaws encompassed the massive chakra. We have to move. Wait. Yagura let the projectile fly, and with an inhuman scream, Viwa unsheathed her sword. On its way, the legendary sword encountered the chakra missile, and a powerful explosion resounded. Itachi could see how the projectile had been sent into the air, but when the smoke cleared, he saw Via nailed to a tree with his own sword, the hilt lying disconnected. In his hand, the blood flowed from both his stomach and his mouth, and Itachi knew at that moment that his partner was dead. His brain had not yet accepted it. Itachi took a step forward, and then Yagura landed in front of the two. Itachi panicked, because a second the thought of hurting Naruto and failing Sasukendo, his conditioning, and making him lose control for the slightest of moments, it was enough for his Mag-Ku to activate and the black flames of Amaterasu to be unleashed on his enemy. Yagura collapsed on the ground, the fire burned through his chakra cloak, and Itachi felt intense pity for him. An intense pain radiated from his eye, and he felt blood seeping down his face like tears. The chakra drain from that technique, it was quite considerable. I needed to work on it more. Music domino. Shinobi by bloody mist. I want to die here on this land. I've been for too long to be at peace. Itachi knelt down and placed the handle of Viva's sword in his hand. The swordsman smiled as his hand gripping the hilt. He closed his eyes and continued forward. Itachi waited a moment longer before silently rising from his position and proceeding to leave. The leader wouldn't be very happy either. He wasn't excited about losing Via. He had been quite tolerable as a companion. Maybe Madara would find some way to convince the Nia's 7 other giant swordsmen to join, as long as she wasn't paired with someone annoying or openly bloodthirsty. Muni quickly entered the room, checked to make sure she hadn't been followed, and stamped her foot 3 when confirmed that he hadn't grown up in the Blood Mist village. It hadn't been easy, especially for someone with a Kek and Henkai. Having 2 didn't help at all. He could have run away when the bloodline fleas ended, but this was his home. This was the home of all Kairos shinobi. Regardless of what caste they belonged to, running was not an option. So instead he formed an insurrection cell. He gathered a group of other like-minded traitors. He was in the middle Of planning a coup he was going slow because if included the wrong person everyone would die, and any hope Curie had of changing her current course would die with them she had gathered into her trust. Those who would become the lieutenants and generals of her rebellion organized a safe house to gather in any emergency. Losing a member of his group was one of those emergencies he had just received. Ao's message when he felt it turning outside his house. It had not been easy, but he had managed to lose them. His tension had only increased on his trip, and he was at a wrong signal to burn the building with his lava throw. Terumi-sama turned the kunai pointing directly at the jugular before registering Ao's voice. His right hand remained motionless like a stone, faithfully submissive, sure that the person he had sworn loyalty not to take him down by mistake. He wondered how calm he would have been if he had realized how close he was to killing him at that moment. Oh well, it didn't matter. The village was infiltrated earlier today, and one of our men didn't survive. It was one of the unturned Injigura sent. After the infiltrators Joby and Itachi Uchiha, that is the one who defected from Konoha, the Kubakurabacho was recovered. In fact, lady for Andos, it seems that Yugura has decided that the next bearer should be Zabuza Mamachi. I am sure that he himself will report later, but there is more due to the nature of the infiltrators. Yugura himself came out of his tower. She couldn't help but gasp in shock. Yugura had not been seen inside the village for over months. His paranoia made him believe that a group of traitors was willing to kill him. It had not been the most convenient. If Yugura had left the Kage Tower I would have seen it. Then you were right, you saw it. I did it, and yes, Yugura Karatachi is under a powerful genjutsu. He is under the control of another person. Mayase felt that. Her legs were falling out from under her. The ramifications of this were incredible. One thing was for a Jinchuriki to become a tyrant and go on a bloody rampage, but this someone out there was destroying their country, and they would pay. It's time to up our game. Mao summon. The rest of us have to make a plan on how to proceed. Of course my lady had something in mind, some ideas. Kurenai laughed while Sua smiled mischievously. They were on a terrace in one of the few gardens within the complex. Iritobi, he loved spending time with him, but he was always a little more expressive and open. When they were inside the clan compound she didn't care very often. It just gave him another reason to come and stay in the gardens. Imaru's nephew was laughing and playing with some monkeys summoned in a nearby field. They spent quite a few of their dates looking at the boy. It seemed that his usual playmate Naruto was not as available as before. It did not surprise her. The boy deserved to be made jounin, and once again her thoughts had strayed towards the blonde. Jinchuriki could see Asuma looking at her with a knowing glint in his eyes and sighed exaggeratedly. Seriously Asuma, you can't tell me anything about him? Oh, interesting. You've given up trying to trick me into revealing his secrets. Yes, I have. You're too smart, and you're quite unpleasant every time he tried. She smiled while he laughed sheepishly. Why do you want to know so much about him? Her mind returned to the Junin exam, what Naruto had told her in the moments before his defeat, her fears of getting too close to Zma. He told me something during the Jounin exam. He was surprised to see that her words seemed to resonate deeply within him. He sat up and looked at her with a very serious expression. Whatever she told you is real. You didn't raise a hand while she opened her mouth. You have to tell me what it was. Obviously it's very personal, but did I ever tell you what made me stop being one of the 12 guardians of harm? She shook her head. That story had been the most searched after Naruto. It would make sense that they were connected to the stubbornness with which she danced on the topic. I returned after the destruction of the group when only Chiriku and I had survived the coup. Kazuma was going to lead his reform because I couldn't deal with my father. He was ruined in many ways, and the day I was going to return to the capital Naruto appeared. I had solo about 2.5 years. This was right after dad adopted him, made him his ward. Of course I hadn't really met him at the time, but he looked at me and told me he knew why he was so angry. He was scared that I wouldn't make daddy proud, that I wouldn't not be able to forgive myself. Asuma stopped to wipe away some tears, and Karina took his hand and silenced the boy. Just knew I could tell every bit of darkness floating in my head sighed and crying with me. It was the first time in a long time that I remember him hugging me. The three of us sat there for what seemed like the longest time, and when I started to calm down Naruto asked me to go read to him. I was supposed to go to the capital, we all knew, but he asked me to go with him, so I went with him and I stayed, and I don't regret it. He looked at her, and she was touched by the warmth in his eyes as he looked at her. Whatever the boy told you, you can tell me when you're ready, and whatever it is I know you're strong enough to handle it. I can't wait to see you when you do. She felt tears building in her own eyes and leaned forward to hug him. She desperately wanted to tell him the truth, but his voice just wouldn't come out, so she hugged him tight and held on. Soon she told him she would soon say. That was a promise one she made to herself. The work papers were a skill acquired by Kabuto, and of which he was very proud. He had perfected simultaneous writing with both hands, but his specialty was in his memory eidetic. He had performed the operations necessary to make it, so Kabuto never forgot something he ever read, so spending a day doing all of Orochimaru's paperwork was one Of the greatest intellectual thefts in living history, of course, the information itself was harmless. You would have to have truly deep knowledge of Snack Sanon's protocols and keywords to read between the lines. Kabuto had been there at its creation. He had been a pioneer in Nine's village bureaucracy. San was Orochimaru's right-hand chief scientist. He was Snake Sanon's only weakness. One day he would act on Naruto-sama's orders and take Orochimaru to his grave one day. But not the day. Today he was gathering potential recruits for Naruto's route, at least the shinobi information of interest. What he wouldn't do to burn this place to the ground, but he was loyalist, and loyal shinobi only burned enemy bases when ordered or forced to do so. He was worried that Orochimaru had sniffed him out. He would have seen the change within him. He would have known that the will to fire had been rekindled. Kabuto had made peace that if he did, if they found out, he would eliminate the San and he wouldn't die trying. That's when the man smiled and asked what he knew about Tsuki. Admittedly, that wasn't much. Sasori had recently joined in the last few months at the same time that Itachi. Naruto wasn't happy about him. He was informed that Itachi was now part of a S-rank terrorist sect, yet there was no way to learn more about the organization, yet that was until Orochimaru revealed that he had been invited to join and planned to take advantage of this opportunity to obtain the Sharingan. He had left shortly after but had tasked Ob with reorganizing his scheduled research and preparing an appropriate vessel in case he was unable to acquire Itachi's body. Kabuto had set to work for both masters to move Orochimaru's plans toward Adamante. Forward to Naruto's. At this point they would both learn invaluable data from the investigation of this base. The study of the cursed seals would surely interest Naruto-sama. At the very least, it would be good to keep an eye on the snake's plans so as not to be caught off guard. There came a time when that Orochimaru finally realized that he had defected. It was his duty to do as much damage as he But while getting his way up to that point for Konoha, for Naruto-sama, Iwa and Kumo have decided to invade us. Kakashi, his Anbu commander, stood at attention in front of him in front of his desk, so we didn't adhere to formality at this point. Hokage-sama sighed at the edge of Kakashi's voice. He knew exactly where this conversation would lead, and he very much wished he didn't have to go. For this again, Kakashi attack was a perfect shinobi, except when he had to. Naruto had vehemently protested Naruto's promotion to an incomplete Hiruzen himself. He hadn't wanted to continue, but his hand had been forced. Naruto had done it in exemplary fashion. There was no way he could stop the boy after that public display of skill. The boy's abilities had been kept secret enough, but Hiruzen felt strongly that the day was approaching when the world would know that Naruto Uzumaki was not going to let things be like this. He was going to shake the world. Ranking and fighting for what he believed in his will was as contagious as that of the Shadame Kakashi. I'm sure you have a very important reason for this conversation, but I'm in the middle of managing some important documents regarding the trade routes with Naruto is the new rot leader. No, Hiruzen regretted quitting smoking, as he was sure the smell of his favorite tobacco would have done something to eliminate the migraine building up on his forehead. Yes, although I'm sure I won't be happy with it's just a child, or Kahama is only 7 years old. Minato would be because of Minato's actions that things have gotten to where they are today. He watched Kakashi tense before his words. The attack was almost too loyal to those who had passed. Sometimes it was his biggest flaw. Naruto Uzumaki is not a normal child. I thought you would have made peace with that. Protecting him too much will not help him, and his growth will not help him. The child has the skill and knowledge of many years older than his age. The only thing stopping him at this point is his body, and that is not something we can fix. So yes, he is someone I can intrinsically trust to keep Rod on the right path. Someone it is almost impossible to interrogate. Someone who is the closest thing to the will of living fire that I have found. I have taught him to be a good and honorable man. I have taught him everything I wish my children had wanted to learn. He is my legacy, and someday he will be the cashier. You know it. To tell the truth, not only was he trained for the position, he was born for him. The only uncertainty is if he lives to see that day arrive. I want him to let Rot be a Jounin. No, I don't, but I do have him in charge of Rot. Means that he has to spend more time inside the village while he appeases his need to defend his home, so I will water that seed. I will walk with the boy so that he comes to me when he needs it. Trust the boy, Kakashi. Trust him to use what we have taught him to keep him safe. Kakashi just looked at him before nodding stiffly and jumping out the window. Yusen groaned and called his guard back to their positions in his office. Send by Danzo. I need to talk to him. Naruto was with Rosie at the top from a cliff overlooking the first wave of the Iwa army. The mountains of Iwa were rocky and very similar to those of Kumo. The camp was located in a valley protected by the foothills of the mountains. The power that was gathered seemed to have been counted in the 900, with the most drip every hour. 900 shinobi at least. The numbers were in favor. I have a plan, Roshan, one that will largely only work once after this. My strategy probably can't be used for this effect, kid. I have no idea what are you talking about? Naruto nodded and looked towards the Iwa shinobi army that was gathering. My father once destroyed an Iwa battalion. It was at the Battle of Kanabi Bridge. He felt Rosie tense and looked at him. He felt fear and realization. A flash. Of hate before it seemed to disappear when the man exhaled. Of course you would be his son. I guess it's supposed to be a secret, huh? I'd appreciate it, Roshan. Let's see if I can live up to his legacy. With that, Naruto started running up the mountain. After they quickly climbing towards the top, he could feel Rosie resigned and guilty for what was about to happen. Honestly, Naruto feared what was coming. The large force of people beneath the valley radiated a larger group of negative emotions, but for Naruto that was his life, his daily problems, his grief, his fears at dawn. Most of everything would be gone by the small town for the future. Naruto was resting on a rock outcropping just below the top of the mountain. He was well above the Iwa camp. It was his first time so high, and it was almost fascinating. He couldn't see individuals from this height, and his empathy couldn't distinguish anything more than a general collective of emotions, as if a great beast snoozing in the valley below. He closed his eyes and allowed his senses to expand. Kurama's chakra began to seep into his body. His features became more animalistic and he began to cry. Tears began to slowly fall down his face before he suddenly stood up. He would need more empathy for what he was about to do. Sure of his own boy, he absolutely took a step back and took a deep breath to calm himself before he shot forward, and over the edge of the cliff, he gave a breathy scream of excitement before taking control of himself and refocusing the purser Kurama's chakra, his momentum. And he flew high into the air, farther than he would have been able to jump on his own when gravity took hold of him and he began to fall. He felt his own doubt and fear twisting in the pit of his stomach. His intended path, it was dangerous with a huge chance of failure. He would have to fight harder than ever before he couldn't fail here. His plan was reckless on a multitude of levels. Itachi would have called him an arrogant fool. Kakashi would have reminded him that he didn't always have to do things alone. Uzun would have said that the risk was not worth the reward. However, Naruto knew in his heart that the three of them, if they had their abilities and were in their position, the three would do exactly what he was about to do. It was not said that the will of fire carried with it the propensity for martyrdom, only needed experience to know how much it was worth, and there is only one way to gain experience. His plan had a higher degree more successful than his mentors would make it seem. In the first place, his enemies did not suspect an attack, at least not from a person, and not from above. Of course, his sensors would have a barrier that would cover their heads as a precaution. But that would not do much good if they weren't already prepared. It wouldn't do much for them. If an entire army rained at once, it might just consume most of their chakra. Multiple shadow clones smoke covered the entire sky over the camp, was going when 2,000 clones appeared at once and descended on their unsuspecting prey. The sensors were suddenly overwhelmed with data, as where before there was nothing, there were suddenly 2,000 enemies falling on their heads launching jutsus. The Naruto first used a wind jutsu that slowed their fall safely and that repelled any of the projectiles that were thrown at them when they landed. The first objective of their mission was achieved, inciting panic among the forces, and the great emotional sensation of the camp quickly fell silent in a sea of fear. There had been no warning that such a large force was moving against them, and suddenly an entire army was attacking in the middle of their camp. Naruto didn't blame them. He was sure the nature of this attack would never have been encountered before. If they didn't join together, then it would be a massacre. It was up to him not to give them that chance. The Jounin reacted quickly and began to engage the enemy and tried to marshal a counterattack, but the army was mainly made up of Chunin and Genin, young ninjas from Iowa, who were not prepared for this ambush. The fight broke out, and every time a clone appeared, Naruto recovered the memories of the young ninja he had killed. Very quickly, he began to add up to dozens. That did not mean that his enemies were not capable. After landing, each clone here relied more on taijutsu to eliminate his opponents. The original Naruto did his best to stay away from any fights. Maybe he had a handful of jutsus left that he could throw. The fires devastated the stores. Naruto, all he did was act to create as much chaos as he could. If there were no enemies nearby, Naruto's clones were placing explosive tags and incendiary tags throughout the camp, taking out as many tents, weapon depots and medical tents as he could. Tears were streaming down his clones' faces, and at this point it was no longer just a side effect of Kurama's help. His heart was torn. But this is what a shinobi must do: defend his village at all costs. His clones acted together in unit, systematically facing any enemy that stood in their way. Naruto had read the stories of war before. He read the Sambo reports. He had heard the Sundaime's first-hand accounts. If this force of shinobi had encountered the Kumagakure troop, then a war would break out with Konoha in the crosshairs. They couldn't be allowed to mobilize. This had to stop here. Now you are acting like the shinobi system wants you to act, Naruto. You are little more than a weapon. Now all this death was necessary. Yes, it has to be. It is too late to turn back now. His grip began to slip on his Kuma, and when all the blood seeped down the blade and soaked his hand, many different enemies, dead ninjas, dead people. Once you finish this, we will see if you think it was really necessary. Naruto could feel Kurama's disappointment, but he had no time to feel guilty. Now was not the time to doubt. It was like he Said it really was too late. Naruto the original. He was heading to the outskirts of the camp in the middle of a group of 5 clones. They had set their seals and were stealing everything they could on their way to safety. He observed the destruction around him and saw some deaths from 2 perspectives. Different. The lives he saw the clones take were the most difficult because when those clones fell, his memories would stand out more and really blur the lines of his reality. He had killed before, but never this much, never to this degree, was reflected in fearful eyes when his sword bit the neck of a shinobi below him. He saw amputated arms and legs, heads that his wind chakra passed through so cleanly, soldiers screaming as they tried to contain the blood in their bodies, clutching their wounds as if it could dull the pain inflicted again, and begging for mercy as their teammates die before him. A young woman pleading for the trembling form of her lover as a group of his clones descended upon Andos, the young couple holding each other in his arms as their blood pooled over the earth. Naruto became acquainted with a multitude of responses that people have facing his imminent death: loyalty, fear, cowardice, pleading, denial, fury, despair. Now there are dozens of dead asking him why he was doing what he was doing. Who was he to them? Who deserved such slaughter? He saw himself everywhere. He looked with crimson eyes and hands soaked in blood, tears slowly falling down his face. He didn't see compassion on his own face. He didn't see hate. He saw resignation. He didn't know if that was worse. The continuous gaining of memories from the defeated clones was making Naruto quickly lose hope. It added to the purpose of his actions. The memories would be his forever, each one adding more and more to the fact that he had made a mistake. The shinobi reacted well after the initial surprise. His troops began to regroup the few censors that remained, the few that he had not managed to kill in the initial combat. He was quickly gathering information for his commanders. Troops were being gathered, and the organization was recovering from the carnage. After all, it was only expected that no shinobi force of this caliber would succumb to a surprise attack. For a long time, Naruto's forces were combing the camps, but they would eventually realize that they only needed one good hit on each enemy, and the rate at which the clones were being exploited was rapidly increasing. Naruto had hoped that it would have taken a little longer for them to regroup, but there was nothing that could. What to do now? The Sundai had taught him that the most important lesson in a pitched battle was to turn strengths into weaknesses and anticipate the enemy's movements with that in mind. Naruto grimaced and took out a signal seal, tied it to his tsukunai and threw it at him. As high as he could he sailed through the air, and just when he reached the apex of his trajectory, the seal stopped. A blinding red light shone over the entire camp. There was a moment when all the clones stopped to capture the signal. The clones' greatest weakness, it was that it only took one good hit to stop them, which made taijutsu the most efficient way to dispel the enemies. There was an easy counterattack to this. The clones reached into their bags and began setting off explosive tags every time someone approached. The melee suddenly throughout the air and camp. Explosions, body parts and blood flew into the air as unsuspecting ninjas screamed in pain or died without a sound. The order that was quickly beginning to be restored was broken once again when the attack on the camp intensified even more as smoke clouded the skies. Water flooded the ground and the wind broke through the earthen walls that were raised in defense of the attack. Chaos prospered. Screams filled the air. Screams of defiance and pain. He alone went witness to every violent act that took place. The living memory of an entire army, the value of an army of blood in his hands, was too much. The weight was too much to bear. Naruto continued to fight while crying. According to his calculations, 15 minutes had passed, and they were already lost. Hundreds of Vitas had lost 3 of his 5 guards, and were almost to the edge of the camp when a scream was heard. He saw a girl maybe a few years older than him screaming as a large sphere of earth collapsed within herself, sobbing uncontrollably as one of her clones stood behind her and pointed a kunai at her neck. She felt her eyes widen, and before she realized what had happened, she was holding a kunai in the middle of a cloud of smoke. The girl looked at him with absolute confusion and despair. After he had blown up his own clone, her hair was singed at the edges, and she had cuts along her arms. Her pink eyes looked at him lost and overwhelmed. She was swirling with pain, shock and depression. She was completely defeated. By what couldn't he answer? The truth tasted like ashes on his tongue. Kuretsuchi. The group of 6 jounin approached him and his 2 guards. The girl didn't react. She just sobbed in silence. The man who led the jounins growled and prepared to attack. Naruto didn't know. She was surprised to feel that he was her father. There was a clear family resemblance there. Let her go. Naruto quickly dragged her inert form and held a kunai to her neck. Stop the jounin. They stopped their advance but did not lay down their weapons. Some damage occurs. All of Iwa's power will fall on you. Naruto tensed up and held back the urge to scream. I can't leave her. If I take her as Rin, that is the lever that could stop Iwa. Force her. Naruto, the kidnapping is beneath you. Is this really something? What would you consider? I have no choice. Kurama ignored Kurama's scoff and tightened his grip on Kuretsuchi as she began to realize what position she was really in. Come on please dad, don't let them take me. Naruto felt his father's heartbreak and the rage that slowly but surely grew inside him. His father would have felt so hateful if he had fallen into danger. The love was so powerful to create such I hate. We could talk about this boy Let her go and you can still get out of here alive. You are a terrible liar. You have already signaled to your forces that I am here. My true self. Naruto felt so much of the man. This revelation seemed to resonate something within the Jin in front of him. He watched as the man smiled darkly. The Raikage mentioned a rather interesting shinobi that the Hokage seemed to have taken a great interest. And one who seemed to have some jutsu connected to information gathering. The books are not available yet, but there was an entry in the bingo book to you. Thank you for showing us your face. My face alone will not endanger me. Your threats mean little to me. Now clear the way, or I will kill your legacy. Were mere moments when he finished speaking that he felt the decision to attack manifest itself. He crouched. Kuretsuchi fought in his arms as he ran past a burning tent. His two guards stayed behind to hold back the tide, but the group left. And then made quick work of them. Naruto was finally able to knock out Kuretsuchi, but barely avoided a spear of earth sent to his head. Naruto bit back a curse as he got closer and closer to the edge of the camp, but he could feel the Katsuchi girl's father gaining ground behind him. The smoke made each breath burn. The blood from a wound on his face began to bleed in his eyes, and he realized that his regeneration was extremely exhausted. He was running dangerously low on chakra and could no longer use Kuramas without putting himself in danger. Maybe this whole idea hadn't been the best plan. I understand you. Naruto felt something hit his back and hit him against a tree. Kuretsuchi fell from his arms and groaned in pain when the impact hit his head and made him losing concentration. He could feel the intense hate emanating from the protective father, but his vision was getting worse by the second. You think you can come to our camp and just leave? I hate to tell you, boy, but you were sent on a suicide mission. You would never come back from this. Your Hokage ordered you to die. Naruto. He heard a kunai being pulled out of a holster, and he tried to lean forward and prepare a defense. He could feel the attack was going to be for his neck. He could do this. I'm not done yet. I'm not going to die. I'm not going to die. I refuse. But even when his arms went up to defend himself, Katsuchi simply changed course and kicked him in the chest. Naruto jade for air, but nothing came out. His lungs were screaming for something, but they were stuck. Naruto felt like he was suffocating, and just as his body adjusted and he was about to breathe, another kick stole his breath once again. You had your hands on my daughter. My daughter. Naruto groaned as a large fist hit his face. Naruto heard something break, but he couldn't even tell where the pain was coming from. He blinked and realized that he was lying on the ground with his body limp. I could see one of his arms, his left arm. His head was resting on the top of his left arm. His left hand was palm up, covered in blood, but even through all that he could still see the scar that almost cut his hands in half. I can't die. I promised Itachi that he would be safe. I promised Kabuto. I promised Kurama that I would free the Biju. Kakashi Yusen's foot knocked him onto his back, and across his blurred vision, he saw the blade was ready to take his life. Kurama, I save your breath, boy. It's not over yet. Naruto blinked in confusion and watched as Katsuchi's body froze. Then he stood up and sheathed his kunai. Kano-sama, let's evacuate. Naruto blinked once again. He then began to regain his senses, and his vision began to clear. Fu, yes, we are going to finish off this enemy. When Katsuchi, possessed by Zuu, pointed a kunai at his own throat, Trun appeared next to Naruto and began to assess him for injuries. He was still difficult for Naruto to concentrate, and yet when his body started to hurt more, his mind became clearer. He had never felt so weak before. Don't stop him and take the girl. We have to meet Rossi and escape, but erase his mind. There are no memories of tonight. Fu, he nodded and began to carve a sealing array into Katsuchi's hand without hesitation. Trun slung Kuretsuchi over his shoulder and lifted Naruto into his arms. Let me help you, like Sam. Naruto saw the handprint of his still red Jinchuriki cloak and raw and Torun's throat, and he felt an immense wave of guilt wash over him. Ija, thank you, Ando's. Trun and Fu nodded. Trun ran out of the clearing, and Katsuchi's body fell limp to the ground as the seals spread over his form, keeping him in a state of paralysis behind them. The Iwa camp was filled with the sounds of war, while the rest of the clones continued with their mission. It would not end for a while, now, until the final clone was defeated, but Naruto and his allies were gone without a trace. A week later he found Iron sitting in his office with Danzo. Last year, it had been full of changes, the loss of Itachi and most of the Uchiha clan, Naruto's Rodijuan and leadership exam. However, one of the most subtle changes had been Danzo himself. Yuzen couldn't pinpoint exactly what was so different in his behavior. Childhood friend, but it was actually starting to annoy him. You've been acting out lately, Danzo, for some reason in particular. His old friend chuckled. It's always so refreshing when you lose your temper. Oh, I'm sure it delights you. Yuzen frowned and bowed towards Adante. You have been silent since the Uchiha massacre. It seems that Naruto has taken control of Rot from you. No problem, that's too much for you to believe. I know better. Danzo simply smiled and nodded. I know it seems strange, Yusen, but the truth is that I don't have no inclination or motivation to take a step beyond what is currently assigned to me. Maybe that comes from the new fire that the boy has ignited within you. I admire your intuition, but I hope I can put it to rest. Also, this meeting was to discuss the massacre from Shadow Lay to the propaganda department, I love their poetic names, I'll find out what you're hiding. Danzo sighed and dropped the topic. Yes, Shikaku decided that we should take possession of the attack as a preventive measure. The attack will surely make Inoki withdraw from any immediate plans that force abandon his plan and leave him trapped in this alliance if we can somehow convince the Sekage to join us. In this alliance we have a chance to force Kumo to commit. I think you chose the wrong town to enter the treaty. Hiruzen stopped and raised one in question. I know you're not referring to Iwa, so Kurigakure are on the brink of civil war. It's almost certainly your own spies said the fighting would happen within a year certainly, but with the events of the Shadow Valley massacre having gone how they have done it has changed things. The boy almost died. Danzo from chakra exhaustion no less. He is still not ready to be a one-man army. No, he is still not able to take on an entire army alone, but now he has more than enough power to be a powerful bargaining chip. It is of utmost importance that we keep its safety guaranteed. Danzo rolled his only visible eye and frowned for the first time in months. Sarutobi. There are ways to use the asset you have under your command, as well as mitigate the danger it poses. Faces Konoha. The town has accepted responsibility for the attack. The credit for the success of the mission must go to Koha the agent. His face did not have his mask, nor did he have an itate, no headband, no leaf symbol from now on. He must always go to the masked missions. This strategy won't last forever. As soon as a bingo book with his face is published, the whole town will know who he is. Spies will spread the word after that, so we have to spend time thinking about a card. Make one or train the boy up the point where it doesn't matter. Very well, I had something on my mind, something like that. How much the boy knows about sealing? It's hard to say. He hasn't had any formal training and our books only go up to the intermediate level. Danzo nodded. The sealing masters were few and far between. Yes, it was an art that the average shinobi still barely understood. Perhaps the time is approaching to guide him towards his legacy. I'm sure his parents left some sealing tomes. Yusin went to respond abruptly, but Danzo beat him to it. And yes, study without the presence of a teacher is dangerous, but we really don't have the luxury of time to wait for your lustful student to finally make a comeback. The boy needs to learn, and the perfect opportunity to gift it to him is approaching. Hiruzen looked towards the trees that were slowly beginning to change color at the arrival of the autumn. Yes, it's almost day. No, you don't remember anything. Kitsuchi stood still. He gave no sign of further weakness. No hint of disobedience. Standing before his Kage, who turned out to also be his father, he acted like a loyal shinobi and an obedient son, even if the interrogation and the reprimands were making him even more angry. I don't remember the attack, but my squad has pieced together a timeline that ends with me following the aggressor to the edge of the camp a long time ago. Birds of clones intercepted them behind me, and when the fight was over they discovered me incapacitated. Yes, well, we have both been through the interrogation. I am asking rhetorically, how the hell did you let them take your daughter? Don't look at me like that, boy. Your failure could very well cost you your life. He clenched his teeth, but remained silent. Inoki sighed. Inoki was not old and was growing older day by day. The last of his hair had turned white, and recently his back had begun to hurt every time he strained. Tsuchi Inoki had been preparing Kuritsuchi to become the next Tsuchikage. She was family, her legacy, her daughter. How we plan to proceed? Tsuchikage-sama, Inoki growled as he looked at the missives on his desk. Unfortunately, our options are severely limited. This engagement has begun terribly. The worst defeat we have suffered in almost 2 decades. 500 shinobi dead, 50 of which were honing. Without enemy casualties, now is not the time to act. Kitsuchi remained still and silent, while his father got up from behind his desk and walked towards him calmly. Son, the sand I met. Tsuchikage sat next to him, and for the first time even before Kitsuchi, he broke down his walls and sighed. He showed his weakness and concern. If we want to guarantee his safety, we cannot attack, not with an army. I will send an envoy to meet with Sarutobi and obtain his demands. We will have to withdraw from the joint invasion with. Meanwhile, the Raikage will not be like that. What have I told you about wasting your breath saying things that don't need to be said? Of course he won't. I imagine he'll be very frustrated. The chance of us working together may be in jeopardy, but if we take our time, he may find some way to push them further towards our corner. Kitsuchi nodded, knowing that nothing his father said could come out of this room. I will gather a team. The try to extract. We also lost contact with Rossi, so I will call Anna in the village. It is very important that we see how change the balance after this victory of Konoha. We have compiled a drawing based on all the descriptions. Do something to bring back your memories. Kitsuchi took the drawing from his father's hand and looked at it. A young man with spiky hair, animal features, and tears running down his face. Why the tears? Because all the witnesses of the attack commented that all the clones were crying the whole time. Is some kind of psychological game or a side effect of his ability. However, I am sure that he really was a Konoha shinobi. How can you tell? In addition to Konoha benefiting more from it, Sudahatsu, one of the veterans of the last war, began to notice similarities with the Interceptor Uchiha style, but he did not have any Sharingan I know, and that is what worries me the most. It was about something more than just from having an invasion. This was a revelation, a single shinobi that can grow to fight armies, a shinobi of that caliber hasn't played on the field for years. Maybe Kuretsuchi can tell us more about our new enemy. If she recovers when she is recovered. Father, yes of course, forgive me. You're fired. Who is B? Answer me now. Promise is a promise. Don't make me act lawless. I crumpled and threw his Itori out the window. Maui, his secretary, screamed as he demolished his office for the 5th time that week, and Derry pinched his neck. Bridge of the nose, that dwarf ruined our plans, and don't think that Sarutobi, that old monkey, is not going to capitalize on this. I wonder if he planned this. You are too paranoid, brother, take it easy. See, this is an order. Who is Agent Konoha? Send me if he attacks, otherwise he will break your back. Daru, he stood up, and a B. They stopped and looked at him. Then he is a Jinchuriki B if you are the only one who can defeat him in battle. I never said that. Now the boy is just a cold killer. He looked at Derry, and then at B. That's what it is. You're being too friendly with the enemy. Just because he's a Jinchuriki C, grow up. He's an enemy shinobi building that camaraderie with you. Wake up. He's a threat to our village. B. He crossed his arms and kept his mouth shut, and that just made outside eye. Couldn't believe that B was defending a foreign ninja who had just ruined his plans. Well, we have another Jinchuriki to use. See how you won't contribute. You are fired. Maggie, stop scolding and summon Yujito. I have a mission for Elamite. Terumi looked at the report in his hand and looked at Ao again. This Konoha issued this statement. Ao nodded seriously. A Teramyama, they have published their position on the Shadow Valley massacre. They sent an elite agent, Agent Konoha, to preemptively attack an invading force of Iwagakure, and his only agent succeeded. This could be what we needed. We need allies, manpower. If we had a shinobi of our side that could create an army, we could attack Yagura directly. We don't have the resources to last more than 2 more years now, or never. Do you really think a full attack at this stage is wise? If we have additional firepower, yes. If we let Yagura lead the way, the pace of this war could be prolonged for the next few years. The sooner we can stop the bloodshed, the stronger it will become. Kiryu nodded. I should go to Konohagakure myself. Don't bother, I will go myself. Informs Abusa to stop his attack. When he returns, we will attack as one, with or without the agent Konoha. As you order. Good luck. Terumi-sama. Kuretsuchi opened her eyes, and the first thing she did was take note of her surroundings. She had had dreams of the battle in recent days, and she knew for a fact that she had been induced to an unconscious state during his journey from the camp. He was in some kind of cabin. The outside windows showed trees from a forest that surrounded the building. That could have been a lot of places in the elemental nations, but he had a good idea of where he ended up. Welcome to Konohagakure, Kuretsuchi. I will be your guardian during your stay. He turned in a defensive position to find a young man with blindfold sitting at a small table. He had short black hair and some scars on his face protruded from under the cloth that covered his eyes. He was wearing the outfit of Elise Shinobi minus the headband. Who are you? He tried to access his chakra, but he realized that he couldn't analyze it. He couldn't even feel it. His eyes opened wide, and he started looking around at himself before seeing a mark black on the back of his left hand. That doesn't matter, you can call me Warden if you want. I'm just here to take care of you until my boss decides what to do with you. Your boss? You mean the blonde-haired boy with red eyes? The warden's head seemed to lean towards his side, and he looked at her. Red eyes, burning red eyes with slits in the middle, and he was crying. That's your boss? Oh, actually, I guess that would be an appropriate description of him. Yes, that's my boss. He took you as a king to negotiate better with your grandfather. He sealed your chakra so you couldn't run. He really thought that just because he didn't have chakra he wouldn't run. He had already determined 15 different escape routes out of the cabin alone. Warden smiled and took a sip of tea before speaking. Oh no, he knew you would run. He gave the nod. Coincidence that taking care of you and being ready to stop you actually sounded like a very good practice to get back in shape. I recently recovered from the loss of my sight, and I need some time before I am cleared for duty. A Genin without chakra near Chunin is a wonderful marker. Please don't go easy on me. Kuretsuchi didn't know how to react to that at first. Anger, frustration, hurt, pride. The thought that this blind Konin shinobi was talking to her, looking down at her, really made her blood boil low. I'm going to make you swallow those words, you moron. You're going to realize how overmatched you are by the end of the night. I guarantee it. Excellent, looks like this plan is working for both of us. After all, dinner is almost ready, and then we can begin. Naruto sat down with Rasi a few miles from Shisui's cabin. The two hadn't talked much, especially while Fu was around. After sending the two to alert Hokage of their success, Naruto had left Kuretsuchi with Shizu to protect him. Then he had found a place for Rasi to camp for a while, until they could meet again to talk after a few days of sleepless nights. He had informed Hyuzen that he was going to patrol the Konoha perimeter, which led him to meet again with Rasi. They sat in a small camp at the mouth of a cave. Rasi was more comfortable among the rocks than among the trees, and Naruto could understand that they had fallen into a kind of understanding. They were not friends by any means, but the Jinchuricus united. It was a first for the history books. Rosie did. He cracked his knuckles and spoke. Okay kid, I won't stay here much longer. I understand I can provide you with some places that Are safe if you want, asked Naruto. Rosie shrugged and took the offered dues and flipped through them. He threw 2 into the fire, but held on to the rest. Thanks, some of these are really promising. Of course I meant it when I said I would help you. I mean, you are also free to stay here. The patrols don't come here. How thanks. But I'm not comfortable hanging around here, especially if the girl manages to bumping into me. It's better for both of us if I stay quiet. I have a few places in mind. If I hear something though, I'll go check it out. Well, Naruto sighed and sank a little in disappointment. He understood and agreed that it was better for Rossi to be in movement, but being with another Jinchuriki was never before had he felt completely understood or connected. Well, if you go on your own, I have information for you. If you ever see someone walking around with black cloaks and red clouds, get out of there. They are a group known as Akatsuki. I know about them. Inoki hired them from time to time as third-party mercenaries. Naruto frowned and actually growled at that idiot. There's no way he doesn't realize this is bad news. He probably doesn't care. Kid, what's wrong with them? They're all rank S. Missing ninjas and their real goal is to reunite all the Biju. Rosie blinked and whistled. Okay, yeah, that's something to keep an eye on. I guess I'll really just keep my head down. Then he stood up and put away the papers Naruto gave him. I had handed in before making a fist. Until next time. So child, right now you are going to go immediately. I thought you would go in the morning, and I had questions for you. Rosie squatted until they were at eye level and hit the fist of Naruto. Look kid, not really. Well actually I don't enjoy people. You're kind of tolerable, and that's great, but I'm not one to sit around and talk around the bush. You understand me? Yes, I do understand. If it's about what you've done, no one can judge you guilty or innocent. That's something you have to figure out for yourself. It's you who has to live with it. He shrugged and stood up. I'm a war veteran boy. My hands aren't clean either. Now if it's about being a Jinchuriki, there's nothing I can tell you that you don't know. You're much more advanced than I was when I was your age. Just keep working hard. If I have something for you, I'll be back here, and if I find another one of us, I'll bring him with me. Here, sounds good. Roshan, good luck. You too. Naruto with that went, and Naruto was left alone in the clearing. Kurama, I made a mistake. I don't know boy, but if you did it, the only thing you can do now is do good to make up for it. Yes, okay, thank you for not judging me, for being honest and fair, for being my best friend. Nothing, and thank you too. Sai, I didn't know how he had progressed to this point, but he had started having lunch with Hinata Hyuga. It was an unforeseen event. It ate up the time it took him to write his mission reports, and yet she was practically a perfect dinner companion. He sat down there, she ate her food, and was happy. It was actually quite an arrangement. Well, she was also quite observant. He just had to ask her a few questions about her classmates, and she willingly began to describe them all in great detail. It seems that although she never talked much, it wasn't for lack of things to say. It seemed to Sai that once she felt comfortable with someone, she would open up. Of course, there were some things she was shy about, like receiving criticism about her abilities, but on topics like Naruto she was quite frank. Having grown up going through a lot of time with the other clan heirs, she was quite a valuable source of information to learn more about them. Sai's files on the clan heirs almost tripled in volume after the first 2 days of spending time with her. She was also not a bad shinobi, at least had great potential. She was a perfect spy among the students who would care about what HT Hyuga heard or saw. Shin was also quite excited that Sai had made a friend. Shin didn't seem to care too much about his strategic value, and he was more concerned with how he was giving Sai opportunities to make connections. But if that was what made Shin deal proud, then Sai was happy enough not to correct his misconceptions. Of course, that also meant he was too good to last, or so he was. What went through his mind when suddenly a group of students approached him. Yin leading the pack were Nino Yamanaka and the one. Hello Hinata, how are you? Ino smiled as she dropped down, obviously looking at Sai with measurement. However, he gave no signs of detection. Since Sakura sat down on the other side of the Hyuga, it's been a while since you stopped eating with us. We were wondering what you and your friend talked about. Tell me truth, he asked without even taking his head away from the nervous girl between her. And no, we don't talk, we eat. The two girls did not respond at first, apparently surprised by the answer. He is right. We just eat our food and focus on the lessons. Haruka sense just went over a little lie. At least on his part, he had already memorized all the information. It was useful that Chun Inyuman didn't have to teach the class, but taking the time to silently observe the rest of the class and his target while somehow establishing a relationship with the heiress, and it wasn't a bad way to spend lunch time. Okay, well, do you mind if we join together here? Then Ino looked between him and Janata when the shy girl looked at him for approval, and he nodded. As long as no one is too sent to look at his bento. Choji is stuck suddenly in. Yuzuka and Akichi poked their heads over each of his shoulders, looking at his lunch, which was full of food. What Shin had prepared for him has everything he needs. We could try some. Sai frowned and brought his lunch closer to his chest. Past he had talked more today than ever before in a single day. Shin would certainly be proud of that. He could even give Sai a gift at lunch tomorrow. Anko dragged Karina and by the arm up the stairs to the top of the monument. Hokage finally discovered that she had returned to the village, and it was her own mission to make him inform her of his absence. Kurenai was being dragged because she had been with Asuma every night for the last week and she needed to spend quality time with her friends, or at least that's what she thought. Anko, I had decided for her, at least slow down, we could go faster if you weren't dragging me. Anko, oh relax Snake-chan, you'll be fine. He didn't even have to look back to feel Karina's gaze, and now leveling his path. Don't call me that, someone is embarrassed of her disgusting pet name. Anko loved getting under Kurenai's skin. She prided herself on how easy it was. You promised not to talk about it. After I promised not to kill you for spying on me, and Suuma, I wasn't spying, I wanted some dango. The fact, just because you're on a date doesn't mean I can't go to my favorite restaurant. Tch whatever Anko, you still haven't told me who we're looking for. Let's go. Kurenai, who do you think I'd like to talk to besides you? Kurenai took a moment to think. Naruto, bingo, and look, there it is, he pointed towards the Yondaime head where he could see 2 feet hanging from the forehead of the statue. How did you know it would be here? She said to herself as she jumped through the air towards the stat, still holding on to Kurenai. Luck comes here to times, and usually doesn't like company. Kurenai immediately pulled her arm back and looked at her scandalized. Well, if he doesn't like company, why do we? Hello Anko-chan, Karina and Chan, I'm going to interrupt. Oh you, hello Naruto-san, we're interrupting you. Hanko surrounded Karina, and with her arms, she rested her head on her friend's shoulder and smiled. We wanted to talk, Naruto, it's been too long. He smiled at them, and it was wrong. They both separated immediately and sat on either side of him. It was normal practice not to push to a comrade if they maintained their composure, even if it was known that they had gone through a traumatic experience. But when they could not maintain that composure, that was when the search was ordered. In Konoha in particular, comrades were encouraged to investigate each other's mental well-being, and if that wasn't enough, he referred his teammate or friend for psychological treatment. It was to encourage teamwork and loyalty between the forces, and so far it had worked quite well. The 2 women sat silently on either side of Naruto, and they just sat there. As they moved, he seemed to shrink into himself, going as far as to pull his knees up to his chest. Anko was especially worried about him. They just sat there as the sun slowly started to set. You two know I'm the Jinchuriki of the Kiri. Truth. Anko stopped thinking for a second. She knew it, everyone knew it, everyone except the children. Brat demon Sarutobi stain monster. I think I became a monster. I know how the villagers feel about me. Even now I can still feel it. Even you two are guilty that you used to look down on. Anko took this time to really look at Naruto. Her blue eyes reflected the light of the setting sun, the wind blowing through her wild blonde hair. You're a brat, a child. She put her arm over his shoulder, and she gently pushed him to rest against her side. I am the snake vixen, the traitor, the hopeless one. Of those names mean nothing, but the feelings behind them are real. Her voice was barely more than a whisper. People feel that way about me, and I did something in that last mission that would simply prove them right, child. People think that I am still like Orochimaru. Every time I summon a snake I use M-taijutsu, even if it is to improve the village. They see it as UK, as another sign of my betrayal. They don't care. Kurenai walked over and started running her hand through Naruto's hair. He froze at her touch and froze, looking out at the village. Naruto, what Anko is trying to say is that no one knows you. We feel guilty because we didn't know you. It's horrible having to live with that burden, or that the struggles we have experienced. Ignorance is more powerful and more dangerous than any genjutsu I know. But you helped my dear friend when you didn't have to. You gave Anko the chance at a life without marks, a life free from the shackles of her past. Has done a lot for her. Now she smiles, and I can see how much she means it. Karina looked into her eyes over Naruto's head. Yanko felt her heart beating in her chest for the first time in years. Her eyes began to water no matter as much as she tried to stay calm. You really saved her. You saved her when no one else could or wanted to. That makes you one of my heroes. The boy began to tremble in silence, and they both realized that he had started to cry. He pressed his knees against his chest as much as possible he could, and they both leaned down and hugged him. Also, you saved Asuma. You have done a lot for the most valuable people in my life, and I have no idea how to thank you, and I just wanted him to help. We know it, Naruto-kun. We know you are a good person in a place that demands horrible and terrible things. We do it for each other. Anyone who tries to say otherwise, any shinobi who talks bad about you for fighting for the village, is a damn fool. Can you tell us what happened? Promise me that you won't. You will think I'm a monster. And he put his forehead against the side of his head and whispered in his ear, you could never make me hate you, boy. Now you're trapped with me, and with Kurenai I caused the Shadow Valley massacre. I'm Agent Konoha. Kurenai looked at Anko, knowing intrinsically that they weren't authorized for that knowledge, that they must go immediately and report this. Refer Naruto to psychiatric counseling. They both felt him shrink even more into himself, and Anko sighed and spoke quietly. We won't go, Naruto-kun, but you have to talk to Hokage-sama and get help. Is it okay, or is it okay? I'm sorry, I shouldn't have told you. That's okay, kid. Okay, we're here for you. Let's just sit and watch the sunset. He nodded and slowly relaxed in his hold, and they watched the sunset over the town. Later that night, Naruto walked in his apartment and was surprised to see the kitchen light on. Slowly he went to his house and was surprised to see Lokage and Kakashi sitting at the table waiting for him. There were 3 bowls of ramen, a stack of scrolls, a strange 3-pointed kunai, and a cake. What is this for? Hiruzen smiled warmly. Welcome home Naruto-kun, you don't know what day it is. Kakashi smiled and pulled out his chair for him. It's your birthday little one. Happy birthday Naruto, you're 8 years old. Naruto sat patiently at his table looking at the scrolls in front of him. To him, 3 empty bowls of ramen were sitting in front of him, although Kakashi and Hiruzen were taking their time. Finishing their food. Kakashi was somehow the slowest even though he took the quickest bites, so that no one could see behind him. Naruto mask. He had decided for a long time that his older brother was probably really attractive under the mask, and that's why he hid his face, so that people wouldn't create a fan club for him or something. Actually thinking about it now was probably not right. Incredible how childish he had been all those years ago. 1 year ago everything was fine. Naruto-kun, yes Gigi, I'm fine. That happened from time to time after a mass dissipation of clones. His sense of time would be murky for a while the memories would compact around him. 270 years of memories. Most of those memories were studies. Of course he made everything very surreal. Sometimes it was alone thanks to Kurama, who was able to process all the information without melting his brain. I'm fine Gigi. Oh, I already said that. Yusin paused and put down his chopsticks. Kakashi did the same. You seem distracted Naruto-kun. Naruto lowered his eyes and sighed. I know you're worried. But I'm fine, it's just the memories. I feel weird. My first response is almost always I don't know. Childish Kakashi joked. Hiruzen sighed, and Naruto leaned back as if they would have sketched that. Yes, you are only 8 years old. Naruto-kun, shinobi your age are required to be more mature, but they are forgiven for the impulses that are normal for children. You are not expected to be as mature as me or even Kakashi. Are you in a unique position due to your position to face struggles unique to your own experience? Not even the second Hokage could have foreseen that someone would use his technique to obtain as many memories as you in one day, as much knowledge as you now have at your fingertips. He bowed on the table and patted Naruto on the head, and Naruto felt a familiar warmth spread through him. He never felt more understood and appreciated than when he was with his family. Their love, her trust in him, only made him more determined to make them proud, to make their disappointment in him disappear completely. Good for your birthday Naruto-kun. We decided to give you your parents' notes about the sealing, as well as the sealing scrolls of the Uzumaki clan. Naruto Jade, his inheritance part of that of course, but still he broke with joy. And I can use them, read them to your liking Naruto-kun. We will try to make arrangements so that a seal master pass your final exam, but I'm sure you'll make us proud. Kakashi smiled and ruffled his hair. You already do it every day. I know Minato and Kushina would be very happy with how much you've grown. The tears came out of his eyes, and for the first time in a long time it wasn't because his empathy was growing. Welcome to Konohagakure Terum-san. Thank you. Okay Dono, please Iritobi, it's okay. The woman in front of him was dangerous. Kahe, he could tell it even before she entered the room. There was a point in the shinobi gained enough skill and power, they simply acted differently. They gained a nuance on their body that was almost impossible to hide from you. A shinobi of the same level the shinobi of rank S approached, and many of them approached and achieved that state simultaneously, but Kage was a clear step above. What led you to seek help from Konoha Terum-san? She smiled, and yes, it was quite charming. Any lesser shinobi would read pure sympathy and compassion, except maybe for Naruto himself, really very dangerous. However, Hiruzen was able to overcome his act. She was calculated with every breath. If I had been 30 years younger I would be in love, and Bawako would have been furious, so don't be so shy. Saruto Bono, you are really surprised that I am here after recent events. I am surprised that the news of our recent business agreement with the Land of Snow, having already reached the shores of Kurigakure. He received a flat look. For his response he knew why she was here, but there was no way he was going to give her any chance to take the lead in this small talk. I don't have the luxury of time at this moment. Salute Bono. No, she didn't. The rebellion in Kurigakure was putting up a big fight from what their spies had reported, but they got shortly after keeping Yagura in a stalemate, so I better get to the point. Very well. He read the reports from Shadow Valley. I have come to Konoha to seek the service of Konoha the agent. Of course, if you lend me the help of that one shinobi the rebellion could end the bloodlar in a matter of weeks, or you could take the opportunity to isolate my active and assassinate him at the behest of Iwakuma or any of his allies. How much did they offer? She laughed and returned to the courtesies that political maneuvering demands. I am not trying to add more parts than are absolutely necessary. Working with you guarantees neutrality is one, and as surely he will bide his time for the best opportunity to attack. Kumo is paralyzed by his treaty and is desperately looking for allies to get them out of. If he worked alongside them and killed T-Shinobi Tayuna, they would ally with Yagura, I dare say. That would turn the civil war into the fourth war. Shinobi, just like that. None of us want that, okay? Although it would be another shinobi war that Konoha would win, like we have won all the others. I have no intention of being the first Kage to lead the town to defeat. That is why you are the only logical option to seek help. It is widely known that you prefer peace between villages, or so you claim. The Shadow Bee massacre is almost equivalent to the carnage that the late Yeon Mi-ok inflicted on Iowa that forced them to accept the armistice that concluded the Third War Shinobi. Clearly Konoha is capable once again of participating in another shinobi war, but ending the bloodline war can prolong peace for years to come. What do you offer? She smiled out of if he worked alongside them and killed T-shinobi Tayuna, they would ally with Yugura, I dare say. That would turn the civil war into the fourth war shinobi. Just like that, none of us want that, okay? Although it would be another shinobi war that Konoha would win, like we have won all the others. I have no intention of being the first Kage to lead the town to defeat. That is why you are the only logical option to seek help. It is widely known that you prefer peace between villages, or so you claim. The Shadow Bee massacre is almost equivalent to the carnage that the late Yeon Mi-ok inflicted on Iowa that forced them to accept the armistice that concluded the Third War Shinobi. Clearly Konoha is capable once again of participating in another shinobi war, but ending the bloodline war can prolong peace for years to come. What do you offer? She smiled, comfortable that his acceptance was a conclusion. Inevitable, nice but not quite right, an alliance between our villages with a warning that Kiri will not join any war over the next 5 years. It will take time to significantly weaken the remaining loyalists and rework the village infrastructure, of course. All of our aid trade will offer Konoha to benefit first. You have prepared to give me everything I could want. Terramycin, the deal is acceptable, of course, although there is one more problem. He blinked at me and withdrew the hand he was about to extend. Oh, I have missed something. He nodded and smiled at him. He couldn't match her attractiveness or charm as his weapon didn't come in other charismatic ways. A grandfatherly smile. Oh yes, the land of water will require new damage and our own damage out of you. If he has 2 sons, I'm sure that will be more than pleased to install his second son as the Dino of the Land of Water. Unacceptable. Terumi stopped acting and shook his head. Allow our new Daimyo to be the son of the Daimyo of the Land of Fire. It would be more or less a political takeover, more or less. It would make the Land of Water a vassal state of the Land of Fire. The treaties have taken advantage of me so many times. They are so difficult to enforce in our shinobi world, then I am forced to take further action. You just said it yourself, Terumi-san. Where else do you have to go? Kiri has not acted against Konoha recently. Well, Iowa tried to invade you. Kiri was our enemy numerous times in the past. I understand that you wish to recreate alliance ties between villages, but many would avoid trusting Blood Mist. I am giving you the best treatment you will find. His face was no longer throbbing at all. It was a polite nod of his head that broke the silence of the room. Now I see that you are not as toothless as most would have me believe. I haven't done you any favors in the past, Saruto Bono. I feel quite surprised that Akumo is allowed to break his treaties several times, and I know who he should pay the price to. He felt it and didn't refute it, like you know. You will be surprised to discover that your actions have already resulted in repairs. You just don't know it yet. These are my terms. You can retire to your accommodation to think things over. If you need it either way before any deal is finalized, I will call the Konoha agent to have her meet with you. Why is that necessary? He gave her his most petulant and paternal smile and leaned back in his chair. Because the Konoha agent will lay on the table all the lies that you have told me or have not told me since we met. Deny what you want, but the truth will be revealed in your meeting. She couldn't hide how nervous she felt for him after that sentence. She had no walls up. She could tell that he had complete confidence in that fact. She regained her composure, thanked him for his time, and then left the building. Had not foreseen this meeting. Against his own wishes, he loved him very much, but even he couldn't predict a scenario in which he would lose Naruto as a loyal shinobi and as an asset would not irreparably shake the village to its foundations. The Hyuga incident, information from the military, and Kumo Jinchuriki, the massacre at Chiha. Anzo's conspiracies, his Jouni exam, the massacre of the Valley of Shadows, the Jinchuriki of the Yomi, now wanders on his own initiative. He could be hiding in the Land of Fire for what he knew. If it were discovered that Rosie remains under the protection of Konoha, the hostilities, they would only increase. There was a reason for the Shodame's act of distributing the Vyulu to other nations. Although Naruto did not agree with the principle of using demons as bargaining chips, now Kiri, a new, more tolerant Kiri, could ally and reason with him. The boy's gifts. The problem, if it could be considered such, was that children are not children forever. The boy would develop his own codes and ideology from now on. He followed his Jiji's orders, but as he showed us, the children did not always agree with his parents. A talk was needed. He needed to remind the boy that he believed in him. It would also be essential once again to find out if Meter was trustworthy or not. His trust in the boy was unwavering. He believed that he would turn out different from Asuma and Orochimaru. The power of Naruto was what Konoha needed in her head from her leadership, whether he knew it or not. The future depended on Naruto Uzumaki's words. If he said she was being honest, then he would give her the help she requested. Now if she lied, she would never leave Konoha alive. Keijo that she may be, but he was the god of shinobi. His victory over her would be assured. Then Konoha would send help to Yugura, no matter how unpleasant it was. If they eliminated the leader of the rebellion, it would be better for them. If none of them would stay to seek revenge, or even worse, winning the war without her and holding a grudge, was tired of wars, tired of sacrificing children. The create murderers tired of regretting their past and present choices, hopefully this wouldn't blow up in their faces. Naruto sat at his desk in the new barracks general route and looked innocently at the scroll that was there upon his return. He was shocked to discover that someone had entered his office without express authorization. After sending agents to check if any ROT members had entered or left, it was revealed that none of them had factored and went, then combed the entire office for 2 full days before admitting that nothing else had been tampered with and that he wasn't caught. So that left him sitting at his desk idly poking and prodding T while looking for seals. This is the most childish you've been in a long time. They clarified it as nothing more than a sealed scroll could be a trap, some kind of weapon sealed inside certain. Thinks it is. Naruto examined it a little once more and shook his head. No, I don't think it's something else. Why, what makes you have that feeling? Naruto stayed still. Kurama knew why he felt that way, and he was trying to hide it. Well, he didn't hide it, but he didn't recognize it. Kurama needed to calm down every time he was accused of hide something. Naruto rolled his eyes as Kurama became more and more upset by his emotional processing. You know, I can't control how I feel. I can't either, so stop mentioning it. I'm not trying to hide it. I was trying to get you to find out for yourself. Have what to do with your empathy. Naruto was confused. He pushed the scroll again and was even more confused about why it didn't feel threatening. How does my empathy link to this feeling a scroll can't feel? I could feel. Kurama, calm down. Tell him to think about it. No, but it can mute feelings and emotions in the items only the smallest amounts, but the stronger it feels, the stronger the resonance. You humans would call it retrocognition. You have started honing your empathy without realizing it, so I can feel the emotions imbued in an object. He could feel more than seeing. Kurama nodding at him. In fact, a very rare skill, and one that needs more practice if you ever hope to use it. Beyond vague gut feelings, I am proud that you are advancing so quickly. I honestly never expected you to develop your empathy so fast. What did you expect? Kurum-kun out of curiosity. Well, disappointment. I expected not to be, and well boy, you are more than I expected. You are my first only friend always, and I care about you. You don't need to worry about me. Kurama, I do understand why he is doing what he is doing. Believe that the only way to change the system is to act within it for a better position. I understand the logic. I hate that you are the one who has to be the victim of this on my behalf. Naruto held back the urge to vehemently deny that he was doing it alone, or that he didn't feel bad. He couldn't. Kurama knew how he felt. He always knew they both knew each other and really cared about each other. Sometimes words didn't have to be said to each other. Even now he could feel Kurama's concern, but also his resignation, his hatred for anyone who hurt him. The strength of it was like a boiling sun. He cared a lot about Naruto having so much hatred for his enemies. It was sweet. He pushed the scroll back and closed his eyes. Some tears leaked under his eyelids, and he channeled a hint of Kurama's chakra to increase his empathy. Kakashi Nilsson quickly opened the scroll and opened it to reveal 3 steaming bowls of awesome ramen. He shouted, as did Toon and Fu. Kicked his door and looked for threats. No, and I'm not fine. I'm sorry. They both turned to him, and Fu bowed his head. Are you okay with no-sama? You look embarrassed. Aja might be a little okay. I'm okay really, it's not a problem. I just got some ramen from a friend. Very good, Kano-sama. They both bowed, backed away and closed the door behind of them. Kakashi is the best. He took the chopsticks that were in front of the first bowl and started stabbing them. Wait, how did he find my office? Naruto groaned in exasperation as he realized that Kakashi would be overwrought now and Ruin would scold him for being discovered. How is he supposed to? I must keep something a secret when my brother, Commander Andu, is spying on me when I'm not there. He fumed silently as he ate his ramen and took out the few reports that were waiting for him on his desk. There were 2, both of which were unmarked. He took them with both hands and he closed his eyes. He started to cry once again as his empathy increased. Well, the one on the right hand first feels sharp, excited like a kabuto snake. Maybe. He opened his eyes and opened the folder and smiled when he was right. It was awesome. Kabuto. Okay, notes on the cursed seal. Interesting. Possible recruits. Orochimaru's research. Oh man, I hope he's okay. Speaking of Orochimaru, Naruto, we still have to deal with the last of that soul fragment here. I'm getting tired of taking care of him. He's absolutely disgusting. Give me some time to figure out how to not just absorb all of his memories and then we can take care of that. Okay, fine. But please make it a priority. I will quickly finish scanning. Kabuto's report took note of the crucial information and then put it back down. Well, now this one. Once again he sharpened his senses and tried to discern the identity of the sender of the report. This is difficult. You worry. Itachi. Naruto's eyes opened and he began to quickly read the paper. It was finally him after so long. It had been months since he had received a word from him. He had been worried sick. The report said nothing more than the written information. Only members of the organization had done missions they had undertaken, of which Itachi I was aware that a recent excursion to the hidden mist Yugura the Yondaime Mizukage was Sandy's Jinchuriki. Itachi had defeated him. Apparently Yagura was not dead, but he was the leader of Kurigakura Sobu is Sandy's name. He is rather shy, actually easy to go together with. He didn't like any of us fighting and was content to stay in the temple my father built for him. So you think I could convince Yagura to listen to me? If he knew the two of us worked together, chances are they're Goku and Rosie. They heard you. Impressive maybe. Soon he will have the opportunity to send Fuotorun to go and talk to him. He felt that Kurama's fear that his plan was impossible diminished minutely. Small steps. Naruto was not stupid, but he was confident that together they could save the Biju and change the shinobi system. Shisui had been observing Kuretsuchi for a little over 5 days during that time period. He had attempted 10 escape attempts. Each were made at different times through different means through different escape routes, and all done without chakra. Had taught her well for someone so young. Shisui just wished he could see her face every time. Shun shined right in front of her and kicked her to the ground like right now. It's not fair. You shouldn't be able to use the jutsu if you can't see where you intend to appear. Bad luck. She said cheerfully. That was close that time. You almost got within a mile of the cabin. Good job. She growled, actually growled at him. It was such a refreshing experience after being trapped under the care courteous of Kabuto. No one minded. He liked to joke, although Konoha-sama laughed or giggled every time he told a joke. He quite liked his company, but he was quite busy route running a normal occupation for a child. He was determined to find out more information about how it had happened, but he was still not that informed. However, when Konoha-sama arrived at his cabin with a prisoner of war from Iwa Shisui, he knew that he was presented with the opportunity to serve the village once again. It was a perfect scenario for him to reluctantly provide involuntary assistance in his rehabilitation as a shinobi, and the chance to do something for the good of the village. Catching her always made him extremely happy, so happy that he couldn't help but smile, and it seemed like Kuretsuchi got really mad at it after a while. You're so cocky. Go to now, just because you're too slow to leave me behind. Don't take out your frustrations on me. I've been a perfectly kind guard. Of course, Warden Abiram. No, I'm not an Abayim, his prisoner. He swore under his breath, and his smile reached his ears. He had just been a little lost. The rehab was fine, but it was difficult to have hope. Too easy to just lose yourself waiting for your body to heal so that your body regains the abilities it used to have to escape your despair. It really couldn't be overstated how much the girl's presence was calming your problems. She was constantly looking for ways to kill him or evade detection and kept him focused and too busy to get lost in his depression. The idea that it was so difficult for her to realize that he was in Uchiha was just the icing on the cake. Was in the middle of a path that runs through the heart of the land of lightning. That two figures stood facing each other. There was no one around them for miles, and that had been prearranged. Akatsuki tried hard to never have their agents outside the headquarters without a partner to watch over them. His back after all. Itachi stood idly in the shade of a tree while his new partner slowly approached him. Serving in Akatsuki it was a blessing and a curse. It was actually safer than doing it alone, and yet the work he had done was nothing more than despicable for an organization that intended to create a perfect world. Through the storage of Biju they took every high-paying job they could find. However, you would take any job when you were a criminal organization. Itachi longed for the day when Naruto or Sasuke were in front of him ready to let him rest. Although knowing Naruto he would try to take him back to Konoha, back home. The thought made Itachi smile for a brief moment. The boy was so innocent and naive. Itachi could never live among the village again. Hidden in the leaves, that toll of his life was over. He had heard the rumors of the massacre. Uchiha was vilified and detested the same, as his new partner Itachi was cursing himself for letting Viwood die. His replacement was much worse. All of Kohen Shinobi knew the horror stories of SN Sanin Orochimaru. After all, the man he had piercing yellow eyes, skin literally as white as milk and long black hair. His smile had fangs and was also Nante. Itachi really struggled not to turn him on with Amaterasu Kuku. It's a pleasure to meet you, Itachi-kun. Where has Leader Sen ordered us to go? Kusagakure. We have been hired to destabilize the chain of command there. Interesting enough talking. We have a schedule to meet. While leading the way he began to wonder how long this partnership would last, and also if he was able to end the Sanin's life and make it look like an iron accident. He had just informed Kakashi about Mui's proposal. Commander Yu seemed to be taking it quite well. His worry had diminished a bit after the events of Shadow Valley. However, he could still feel the worry radiating from his thoughts and concerns. Kakashi nodded and left. It took a few seconds to process his initial reactions. He can't be sent alone, surrounded by 2 armies of foreign shinobi. Okay, that would be too reckless. Kakashi nodded and looked at the map of Kurigakura on Lockage's desk. It was dated. The outposts had probably been abandoned ago a long time, but the notes from their intelligence department covered the margins. However, they did not have much information at their disposal. Since Yugura's tenure as Mizukage began, the successful espionage attempts collapsed. Kakashi would know. He is the one who assigned each agent their mission. Suicidal. But this could be exactly what we need to stop the hostilities of Hiwakumo. Kakashi once Again reluctantly felt this was a golden opportunity, an alliance with two other great nations, and if the Hokage could maintain relations with the lesser peoples, that alliance it would be a global superpower that would be difficult to combat. They could force Qua to the table, maybe form a real and lasting peace. Minato's dream so close to being realized. I have been able to contact someone in the Igura regime who is offering to sell us some information. Assign Iki to lead the mission to intercept a Kuriki per corporation deployment, offered Kakashi. Well, we need to know more information about the current position of Yagura's forces. Yuzin said. Kakashi paused and thought for a moment, taking everything on the map back to look up with a question. What is your plan to use? Naruto would have the forces of the Konoha people be used to back up and reinforce his own battalions. He would be held in reserve to make a second wave. If another nod and understanding was necessary, he would need to guard someone strong enough to defend him and fast enough to exfiltrate. It can't be you. You're too well connected to the Yondaime already. I'm afraid that Inoki has made connections with Naruto's family. Kakashi bit back his reprimand. Alright, so that's just leave one option. Yuzin here raised an eyebrow. Seriously? Only one option? There is only one man I trust to protect Naruto from enemies and from himself. He will be able to fight most of Kiri's A-rank forces alone, and if pressed, I am sure he will. He could fight Sami himself very well. I will inform Termian that if he wants the service of the Konoha people he will have to pay for Mgui Hokage-sama. If this goes wrong, it is my professional opinion that Konoha should quietly push our forces to become stronger. I suggest keeping the honing with wartime expectations. I would prefer not to militarize more than necessary, but you have my permission to start increasing Anbu recruitment and training. We will start from the top down, make them strong. Kakashi or Naruto will be alone on the front. If he arrives to war, with all due respect, I would be right at his side. Hokage-sama orders or not if they were his orders. Kakashi, now you have my orders. I want to double our Anbu in the next 5 years. You better start. When Kakashi left, Yuzin couldn't help but feel like he was committing a mistake. Having been so against the war for so long created this perception of him that he was weak. Danzo told him regularly enough for him to know that others were whispering behind his back. When raising, Naruto slowly began to resent him. Fearing that reputation might actually have been leading to Konoha, the town he loved, being too weak to defend themselves now. However, Konoha's political and military influence was at an all-time high. He couldn't help but feel that things were going to start to fall apart. Blur wrong, and it was too late to stop the events that were afoot. He may be tired of the war after all, but that doesn't mean he's tired of it. Naruto was quickly becoming the center of this conflict. He was too involved too fast. He didn't want to exaggerate his successor failure. The Konoha agent would remain hidden for a long time. He hoped his adopted son would understand. Sasuke stopped his hand seals when he felt someone watching him. He looked up from the dock where he was practicing to see his partner. Classes there watching him frowned and was about to turn around when he saw the boy slowly begin a hand seal sequence which he had just practiced. The boy completed the hand seals and shot a fireball of at least 20 feet radius, easily eclipsing any fireball Sasuke could throw. He looked surprised and shook himself as the emotionless boy walked down the path and towards him. Your hand seals need more definitive positioning and your chakra needs to flow more through your lungs. The more you breathe, the bigger the projectile, Sai said softly without sugarcoating anything. The criticisms were pronounced, as if they were from a shinobi, sir. They hadn't spoken to him like that since the man who murdered his father was still around. How do you know what I have to do? Sai shrugged, seemingly unaffected by his condescension. The pale boy seemed fragile. He never seemed impressive or strong to Sasuke. He never performed amazingly, but he never needed more work from Iruka-sense. And after participating in an exercise, how strong are you, Sai? He looked at him boredly and shrugged his shoulders again. Sasuke began to feel that he was being slighted and felt his temper begin to rise. He gritted his teeth. But he remembered what his mother had taught him after the massacre. He took a breath and crossed his arms but held on. Frown, they taught me how to be a shinobi before the academy. I could teach you how to use jutsu if you want. Sasuke had been expecting some kind of adulation, some condolence for the Uchiha massacre. Every new person he met was apologizing for something they had no part in, but Sai didn't even ask to be friends or anything. He just offered to teach him the judo, and well, although he hated to admit it, he was the only one who taught him how to be a shinobi. His mother was too busy leading the rest of the clan, and she didn't want to put too much pressure on him, but he needed to grow up. He needed to prove that the Uchi clan was not gone. He would become the strongest ninja in the village. He would kill his traitor brother and become the Aki, or the head of the Uchiha clan. At least he looked at Sai again, who I was standing there waiting without giving any sign of discomfort in the slightest. Sure, but we can't talk about it, and we're not friends. Perfect. Start by executing the hand seals. No, you're already making a mistake. Leave your frown on if you're angry. You're not focused. Don't tell me shut up and listen, stupid. He took every lesson his mother taught him to avoid lashing out, but if this is what it took to learn more than what they would teach him at the academy. He would pay the price, however. It didn't mean he would have to like me. Kisum raised his head at me view of his food to see Zabuza Mamachi walk through the chambers. Reserved for the 7 swords Chines of the Mist Mamachi was the last edition. Letting go of Kisum, who still did not have one of the famous swords, this was the first time he saw Zabuza without the Kubikirabacho. That did not mean that keeping his sword present was childish. The 7 swords were almost sacred relics, and for Kiri they were national treasures. Kisum dreamed of being one of the legendary 7 espadachines when he was a child. Each fight and each lesson was just another stepping stone. On the ladder to achieve that goal were famous warriors, and Kisum wanted to be the best in his youth. He never understood people. He didn't like them very much either. He liked to fight. He liked to delight in the fear in his enemies' eyes when they realized that he was stronger. He would win. Zabuza headed straight for Kisum, which was another first. They had never talked before, and Kisum didn't know any reason not to unless Zabuza had friends that ended up being traitors or rebels. Then he would probably have problems with him, though it was quite daring to try to assassinate him. In the middle of the village, Zabuza stood in front of him and looked at him. "Are you happy, Hirosaki? It is said that you haven't seen any mission since the last one was a failure." Kisum couldn't help the laugh that came out of him, and he looked. Zabuza finished the last of his plate and towered over the smaller man. It may have only been a few inches difference, but it set the tone in favor of him. Kisum, you better be careful, Mamachi, especially around me. I may be sitting on the sidelines now, but after a few more missions, I think Furuki will agree that I'm more than ready for Sada. I could have had Kubikirabacho myself, but I decided to leave it for the smaller fish." Zabuza narrowed his eyes and tensed. The air stopped, and the 2 warriors looked at each other. Kisum had to admit to me that Zabuza would put up a fight. He was young and would definitely fight, especially if he fought with the famous sword in his hand. Ha ha ha. Oh, I like your spirit, Miss Demon, but it does little more than make me eager for a fight. Maybe we can have a fight once I get my sword. We'll see how you measure up. Why not try it now? Zabuza idly twirled a kunai that hadn't been drawn moments ago. Same's smile widened. And he leaned closer. "Because I don't know for sure if you're a traitor or not, Mamachi. I heard the rumors about you. The interrogation whispers say that you've spoken to rebel conspirators, or that's what a rebel says," he shouted. "For why do you think Yagura put you here with me? To leave you alone?" Kisum laughed, and his sharp teeth glinted in the light. "Are you here so I can keep an eye on you? If you make one wrong move, I will be the last one you fight with. I want it to be a good fight, chin sword against chin sword, so I'll wait. If you're not a rebel, then we'll see who kills more of them on the battlefield." Zabuza growled in annoyance and started walking away. He turned to Kisum as he walked away, shooting just before he couldn't hear him. "Fuguki wants to see you. You have a new mission to protect. Hyper Corporation, better do it, fish face. Just wait, Butcher, I want you to try your luck with me more and more." Naruto entered the Hokage office with his mask on. He entered and bowed to Yusen and looked at the woman sitting in front of the desk. Had long brown hair that obscured half of her face. She was wearing a long blue dress and had a Kirite Konoha agent. "This is Might Terumi, leader of the Kurigaka Rebellion." He bowed to her and stepped back to pay attention. She stared at him as he silently took a moment to let his empathy do its work. She was nervous for him. Part of her was worried that he would be brought in to help assassinate her. Fearing that Kiri's secrets would be revealed. She was getting more and more tense, trying to think of some way to stop it. Her anxiety was skyrocketing, making her less and less rational. She was starting to worry about how long she had been silent. "It's a pleasure to meet you, Teramaisen." She nodded at him, calming down a little. Naruto was a little embarrassed to making her sit like that for so long. A handful of seconds was akin to hours of waiting for wary ninja. She was stronger than him, but maybe not as strong as Yuzen. That could just be her own bias. Boy rolled his eyes behind his mask and looked at the Hokage. Yuzen smiled and looked at her. "You seem a little nervous, Terhumison." "How could they not be when you forced to call your ace in the hole as a warning of our negotiations?" That being said, I'm fine to adhere to his jutsu. Now Saruto Bonosu leader smiled. And Naruto could feel that a part of his guardian felt guilty for how much he was enjoying this little game he was playing. His eyes went back to Naruto and he nodded slightly, giving him approval to reveal the terrible truth. "I made it clear to you, Teramaisen." She looked at him and didn't know how to react. Initially at first it seemed like she was going to laugh, but then she immediately made a face. "I have already absolved you are trustworthy." But I didn't stay silent, and Naruto heard Huan laugh lightly. "I know, Teramaisen, you didn't feel me technique. You still don't. The genjutsu you were curious about trying to use to protect your mind from me is useless. I firmly believe it would have had the same result." I was surprised, and Naruto knew she wasn't used to feeling like this. I knew her ability, his gift, was something else. It was based on chakra just like all other similar abilities, and yet the amount of chakra needed for it was impossible to trace. Free, unfiltered and unrestricted information. The greatest gift he could have been given, at least. That was his own personal opinion. "Now that we have cleared him, Teramaisen, why don't you go over Amos your plan one more time? Agent Konoha, take this as your personal report. Once we are done here, go and inform Mig-Guy. He will be your backup. Well, last this mission, of course, Akasama. We will go to Kurigaka with Teram Misan." "Yes, you will go to war." Before he could respond, his empathy caught anew. Concern from Yuzin, the man who never doubted him before, was worried that Naruto would not follow orders, and he knew that the Dame Mizukage was a Jinchuriki. Naruto, it's okay. He's just taking care of you. Kurama, he doubts me. He doesn't trust me. Just breathe. It will be fine, it will be. But only because he doesn't know that I know Naruto now is our only chance to save Tuisobu, Kurama and Yugura. There has to be a way. If it's too dangerous, then we should let the situation develop. No, I won't just do what is easiest. Never again. We won't let Isobu suffer anymore under the shinobi system. We will free him. We both can do it. We'll have to be smart. Okay kid, I'll start thinking of a plan. Naruto stood at attention as they told me about the proposed assault, but during the meeting, he couldn't shake the feeling that his adoptive father knew something was wrong with him. I'll show him that he can. Trust me that I can save the Biju and help Konoha. At the same time, I forgive you, Jiji. I will prove you wrong, and you will never have to distrust me again. The leaves fell slowly with the autumn wind as Yujito advanced through the forest. This was not the first time she was in the land of fire, but it was definitely the first time she was sent to assassinate a fellow Jinchuriki she had fought belong. Enough to know that she was not an easy prey. She had even communicated with Matatabi and was able to befriend her after learning from the example of Killer B8 Tiles. If he is a Kurama Jinchuriki and has a gift, then you should be careful, dear Alaska. Kurama doesn't care much, and everything he cares about, well, he would get nasty if he defended him. Thank you, Matatabi-chan coldly observed the path that led to the gates of Konoha and settled but not disappoint Raikage's. His trust in me is well placed. You are by my side for this mission, as with all the rest. I just hope that Ama's grudge does not continue. Once she reforms, Naruto found that he really enjoyed Migwai. He had heard stories, of course, from Kakashi. A shinobi didn't need Hutsu or Genjutsu to be really scary. Being moral or efficient, Why was a true taijutsu master and could compensate for not using the other two schools of jutsu. Naruto struggled to compare anyone other than the rake. With the physical state of Gei, he seemed harmless, with his Cuenca-cut bushy eyebrows and a charming but innocent smile. On top of all that, Migwai was probably one of the happiest shinobi Naruto had ever seen. Known but the happiest. When Naruto arrived at the door, he found Migwai already present doing push-ups. The eldest Junin jumped to his feet and saluted without a hint of resentment at being led by a shinobi less than a third of his size. Age was greeted with only respect and kindness. A true shinobi of the leaf had no festering resentment or anger, no jealousy. The biggest thing he could feel was the fear that he wasn't doing everything he could to become stronger, to protect those he loved. Naruto, he was impressed the two were waiting patiently for mere Yumi. Naruto had packed all his supplies, at least everything he could think of. He had checked 3 times before leaving his apartment. The task before him was terrifying. He was worried about the confrontation that was coming after experiencing the events of Shadow Valley. He saw the memories of hundreds of clones in his dreams. Some had managed to make it to the end of the battle, and those memories were the harshest images of the aftermath dancing in his head. Merging, he broke out of his depression when he felt a finger tap his mask. He looked up to see Gei leaning down looking at him. Something on your mind, Konosuke? You seem distracted. Humbly, I offer myself as an ear to rest your worries. Josh. Naruto held back a giggle and smiled behind his mask. Thank you. Gei-san was thinking about the mission and the upcoming fights. A hardened look came over the Jounin's eyes and understanding blossomed within him. I remember what the last shinobi war was like. I too am nervous about participating in the upcoming battle, but I can offer some advice that my father once gave to me. His father? Naruto blinked. He had never heard much about the Gei family, just as he had not heard much about Kakashi's father. He was known as the Eternal Genin, who did not know a single jutsu, and yet he saved my life and the life of my team of the 7 Swords of the Mist. For some reason, Naruto was fascinated with the story. The feelings inside Mig captivated him as he spoke. His negative emotions slowly faded away, overcome by the emptiness of happiness and joy. He was almost empty of anything negative, and it was extremely relaxing. He opened the 8th gate, the gate of death. He fought against everyone. He was stronger than most Jounin, but he kept his strength for when the most Ella needed that kind of power. When it is achieved, it should only be used on oneself. Rule, so as not to risk abusing it. What was his rule? That he would only use his power when necessary to protect someone precious to him. I see why you mentioned that. He looked at him, and Naruto felt like he was trying to be nice to him because we are both capable of amazing things. However, we must be careful when to use them, especially in Kurigakure. I know you know what it costs. However, you have a rule, a self-rule. Naruto made a pause. If it was anyone else, he would have just dismissed the question. Honestly, he wasn't sure why he was thinking about that, except he remembered what I had told Kabuto. You can't break a promise, and I promise not to break none of mine. I don't break promises. Guy smiled at that and gave him a stiff thumbs up. Josh, great self-rule, that would work well. My advice is that you only use your power to maintain that rule. Naruto frowned in confusion. How does that translate to not using my power? Use it only when necessary, so as not to break a promise. G smiled widely with his hands on His hips and Naruto could almost swear he was glowing. Okay, yeah, Josh, I think you and I are going to have a good time. Kurigakure is a wonderful environment for cardio. All the sandy beaches are wonderful to run. I don't think we'll have much free time, Gason, certainly, so we'll have to do as much as we can in the little time we have for leisure, gentlemen. Naruto jumped when Muni appeared behind them, both smiling smugly. She looked a little tense, but quickly he relaxed and gave him a thumbs up. We are excited to begin our mission to help the relief of your village. Miss-san, excellent. We are leaving. She looked at him, and he could see her evaluating him, focused on him, cautious, scared, hesitant. He nodded. Josh, to the land of water. May. She smiled and took the initiative. Perfect, we will meet my escort at the border. I will lead the way. She left, and Naruto and Guy quickly followed her. Sai sat next to Hinata in their seats. They were working on a fairly simple activity, although try not to finish it too quickly. It was proving difficult. It was one of the most basic seal arrays, and this exercise was to identify anyone with talent in Fuinjutsu. Saya identified that no one here would be considered a prodigy, and the arty himself was not a prodigy, but there had long been learned to make the most basic seals, along with his own style of jutsu. The most basic seals were simple. There was something about the patterns, the connections, and the art of sealing itself that made the chakra interact with the world, as it did. The sealing was one of the most esoteric arts because it carried the most limitations in its use at first glance. For most shinobi, the moment to make a seal, and using it would mean death. The pre-made seals were all fine and dandy, but maintaining a vast arsenal of different seals and then damage them, catastrophe. It was not safe to store seals that you did not need. The explosive notes were mass-produced because they were some of the simplest designs. They were made to be destroyed on activation. An explosive release of chakra, however, quite useful in the hands of the shinobi. By that was important for the new shinobi to sit down and be instructed in its creation and use. Quite useful in the hands of the shinobi. That's why it was important that the new shinobi sit down and be instructed in its creation and use. Quite useful in the hands of the shinobi. That's why it was important that the new shinobi be seated and instructed in their creation and use. Directly in front of them was Sasuke. Uchiha behind them were the two girls Sakura and Ino. Since L and Natada had become friends, the other students in the class had begun to paying more attention to him, mainly the other heirs of the clan. It was a rarity to have so many heirs together in a single class. It was some kind of opportunity to gather intelligence. Still, his scrutiny was annoying. It was difficult to observe them. As he shamelessly watched him, the girls behind him had decided that they needed to take care of and protect Hinata from any of their plans. He suspected that they considered him a pervert. That's what they seemed to be mainly worried about. They were learning to be shinobi, and their biggest worries were if Yuzuka was going to spy on them, and which girl Uchiha liked the most. Disappointing. Not even Hinata. She was exempt. Her anxiety paralyzed her at times, and she worried that she would never see Naruto again. At least she had some hope. After all, scouts and spies didn't need to be bloodthirsty. The Uchiha was hard to say. She didn't talk to anyone though the few words he spoke to Sai during their training sessions were something or informative about his personality. He longed for the strength to find his brother and confront him for his crimes. Of course, confronting Itachi Uya in the short term for him was suicide. The Verero Uchiha was gifted, but even he was not up to what the third shinobi war had molded his brother. That worked for him. However, Sai was slowly revealing more and more of his arsenal, and Sasuke was becoming more comfortable with him, more cooperative and enthusiastic with his training sessions. His mission was going very well. Seiken, why do you want to be a shinobi? Looked and saw Hinata looking at him, his complete seal in front of her. She had done quite well. There was nothing else for me. You have done quite well with your seal. And she blushed and looked down at her fingers poking between. Yeah. He went back to his fourth seal and started painting a cubic. What do you mean? There was nothing else. He looked back and saw that she was more or less in control of herself. Strange. That should have taken 10 more minutes. There was no choice what to do. He gave her a smile like Shin had taught her, hoping she would take his answer and get back to work. Instead, confusion slowly grew on her face. Your parents forced you 3 questions in less than a minute. Yada Hyuga was having a conversation with him during class. I had no idea what to do. Hinata continued to look at him, patiently waiting for his answer. No, I don't have parents. She looked at him sympathetically and put her hand on his shoulder to comfort him. Sai's thoughts were overwhelmed. What's going on right now? I'm sorry, Zikin, that must be it horrible. If you want, you can come and do your homework or eat at my house if you're lonely. He nodded and went back to his work, and she looked at him for a few moments before she smiled slightly and went back to her work. Sai, he wasn't prepared for that kind of interaction. She would have to talk more with Shin. And Nada was feeling more comfortable with him and was looking for a higher level of friendship or casualness with him. If she was uneasy about him, that could jeopardize her mission. She had to learn to be his friend. She had to learn quick. Maybe this mission was not as clear as he had assumed. Why does he want to be a shinobi? Kuritsuchi looked at Warden from his position in front of the sink. They We're preparing lunch, and he seemed to insist on getting to know her better and being friendly. What was worse was that I didn't know if he was genuine, and that's stupid, or if he knew that being nice made her angrier, and he was so nice. I'm the Tsuchikage's granddaughter. She went back to washing the potatoes. She wasn't trusted to peel them. The only knife she was allowed to use was a paring knife. Blunt butter, not much of a gun. That's not an answer. I don't mind giving an answer honestly. He was just the worst. I hated his stupid face. This shack. I hated being a prisoner. I hated being kept away from her house. Shut up. Stop talking to me. You are not the prisoner. You can't be nice and talk to me like I'm unreasonable for not wanting to talk to you just because this cell isn't an empty room with iron bars. I want to go home. I want to be a kunoichi of my village, and I want to go on missions and kill as many of you leaf bastards as she can. Her anger filled her, and she rushed towards Adante. Her hand grabbed the butter tray securing her weapon, and as soon as she could her arm slammed down. He stood there with his hand gripping her wrist, the blade pressing into the fabric of his shirt. He looked at her and her anger burned because she couldn't read anything. He was wearing a deep crimson blindfold, and not being able to look him in the eyes made her angry. Sometimes she should have been the one with the advantage, but she didn't see anything when she looked at him. No clues or weaknesses were found. No, instead, her eyes began to fill with tears due to her anger and shame. She was crying like a child, a kind of kunoichi who was Kuritsuchi. Don't say my name. I don't want to talk to you. He let go of his grip. The butter knife fell to the floor, and he returned sullenly to the sink. Silently he picked up the knife and went back to preparing the estua, giving him his space. Listen to her and respect his limits. I couldn't hate him more at that moment. I will come home to Dad and Grandpa, and I will be so strong that no one could ever capture me again. After some time, since we have gone so long without fighting. Rossi nodded to the silent voice of his permanent companion and looked at the beautiful landscapes that surrounded him. The Count was known for its fertile land and its stunning views. He had gone on a mission this way years ago and always wanted to enjoy spending his time wandering the country's roads. A peaceful life he never imagined he would get to experience. Feel someone. Goku the Biju laughed deeply. Mind no, Rossi, I haven't yet sensed no Jinchuriki approaching us or any large group of same shinobi that you wouldn't have asked you to. I kept your senses alert and mine were better than yours. Your paranoia is understandable, but I'm afraid it's no longer necessary. They have kept their word. It seems that the boy can be trusted, and Kurama, I have more reasons to dislike Fox than you. But it seems that we are really on the same side. Roz grimaced and clicked his tongue. That made things more complicated. Imagine if his plan worked. Rossi, true freedom for both of them. It seemed that his partner was already willing to throw those dice, but Rossi was not so convinced as too soon. He just convinced us we would have to guarantee there were more Jinchuriki on board before committing to this. Plus it could still be a Konoha trap. No, Kurama would never ever work with a shinobi village to endanger a brother. No matter how much he says he dislikes us. To some of us, it's not a trap. Well, I would like to have your trust. We could go and talk to Oni Koko. We might be able to convince I won't put you in danger until I'm sure of our chances of surviving success. His mind was so silent as the clouds drifted across the sky. The fields were full of color, and the breeze was sweet with the scent of flowers. It had been so long since I had experienced peace. I had fought countless battles. I had dreamed of retirement, although that fantasy had faded day by day. Had a chance here disappear, fade from memory. Live the life you always wanted. You have wanted this for quite some time, Rossi groaned. In recognition, he had longed for this opportunity secretly and deeply. There were many things he wanted to experience and see. Just retreat to some cabin in the mountain, painting or writing or something. He never had much chance to find out if he was good at either. Maybe garden. The boy kept trying to save the Biju. No, they won't stop. That was the problem. Rossi could wash his hands of the elemental nations, was willing to walk away. The boy was too young, too invested. He would fight and die if necessary. I found help. That brings us to the final question, Rossi. Will you let him fight alone, or will you help him? That was difficult for him to answer. This could be his best chance, his only chance to leave all the fighting behind, to be at peace and live a simple life. The boy could make it without him. With enough Jinchuriki he had a chance, but there was a greater chance that he wouldn't succeed. Naruto would need the loyalty of every Jinchuriki he could put at his side. Not everyone would make it. Some, if not all, the Jinchuriki would die. If he disappeared, at least Naruto would die in his search. That was the cost of his life of peace, possibly condemning the boy to death. Are you okay with that? Hisam stared at the last one. Kira Kunoichi, under his protection, dying by his hand, had been kind and sweet but weak, soft. She looked at him, his agony shaking her body. What a terrible life that was. Vicky Marino in front of them, with an elite Kohen-Jing squad, was too weak to risk being captured. Then Bloody Mist demanded her death, the death of all Cirque shinobi. That's what she had been taught. Everyone was disposable. He didn't regret killing her. It was just unfortunate that it was necessary. What are you doing? Those are his own men. Kasami looked at the displeased Lee's shinobi and frowned. I won't give up any Cyber Corporation shinobi alive. And Vicky growled and took a few steps towards him, his squad preparing their sword. Surrender. There is no escape for you. Maybe. He gritted his teeth at me. If I had one of the 7, he could have fought them, tore them apart, however he was now, if only they had given him Sada det have kiss him. He jumped off the cliff and climbed down to the ism below. By his village Naruto inhaled the coastal air. They had made good time and had reached the border of the land of fire in several days. Mei's pace had been relentless to the point where Guy had to carry Naruto on his back. She could have matched it, but she would have needed a slight help from Kurama. Her identity as Jinchuriki was essential to keep him in. He realized that they had been close to the coast when the temperature cooled and the environment began to change. The dense forests had become coastal forests, and the animals, they had also changed. It was still Tierra del Fuego, but it really felt like somewhere else. The coasts of Tierra del Fuego were quite beautiful. They were not very developed, only a few coastal towns with ports to do trade made most of the coast quite calm and quiet. It was never more relaxed than the areas with minimal human presence. Kurama felt a little guilty about that fact. He abruptly looked towards Adam when he sensed a group of eager shinobi. It seems that his entourage was waiting for them on the boat. "Your men are waiting for us, Terhumison." She offered nothing more than a smile and a nod. They changed course. They arrived to find 3 shinobi waiting for them. Naruto. I was impressed. One of them had a sword that could not be anything other than one of the famous 7 swords. It seemed to be the Kubikirabacho. The other, oh man, the other one had a hidden Byakugan. The Hyuga would be angry if they ever found out. I would definitely be informing the Sundaime about it for sure. Mima, it seems that the mission was a success. Certainly this year. This is Mguige. Smiled and raised his thumb, and this is the agent Konoha. He nodded. Both men paid attention to him. The one with the sword walked towards him. He wore his diadem on his side, his head above his black hair. He had bandages wrapped around his neck and lower face, not unlike Kakashi's mask. He wore arm guards on his forearms and a black t-shirt. Of course his sword, a slab of steel the length of a man, was sheathed on his back. The man was full of pride and bloodlust, closing his vulnerabilities for fear of loss, and the pain was malicious. He enjoyed the fight. The other was more composed, more honorable, but cunning. Both were fearsome in different ways. They were excellent bodyguard for a hopeful cashier. "So you are responsible for the Shadow Valley massacre. How many shinobi did you eliminate, huh?" Naruto tilted his head to look at the 7 swordsmen. He was quite tall. He was also a very violent man. He was one of those shinobi who could never adapt to the civilian life. Naruto knew that Zabuza could never retire. That was sad. He felt bad for him, more than I would like to admit. Zabuza scoffed. "You're just a child. How do we know that you really acted alone is not based on your reputation, also on the actions you committed when you were a misdemon child." Bloody Zabuza laughed out loud, a deep and disturbing sound. The man really had a fearsome presence. "Oh, I know I killed those companions of mine. We are a simple town." Konoha, on the other hand, it is much more devious. "I believe the reports are false. From what I see here alone, I'm safer you didn't act alone." Haha. Kiri's group of ninjas looked at Guy's boisterous laughter. "Agent Konoha is one of our most important shinobi in any case. The reports surely minimize his effectiveness." Zabuza scoffed. "And who is suppose you're Miguai, son of Miguai?" Zabuza rolled his eyes and scoffed again. The man's skepticism seemed to be difficult to contain, clearly as if that meant something gay. He just chuckled. "Maybe I should." My young ally looked at me too. The group gathered and decided to take command. "Enough of the talk, we have to go quickly to Kirilagura. Surely knows something with us 3 missing. My orders have been delivered to." Ha nodded towards her. In fact, Mima turned her gaze towards Zabuza, who grunted and nodded in the same way. "Excellent way. Then let's go." Shinobi nodded and walked towards the beach, where a small boat was stranded. Naruto and Gai followed him. Naruto didn't sense any plan to stab them in the back. Well, Gai had been informed of the possibility that Yugura's agents could have infiltrated Mei's inner circle, but it seems that was not the case. They boarded the ship and began sailing towards the islands of Kiri. It was time to go to war. "Yusin, praise your apparent cruelty took me quite by surprise. It is not often that I admit it, and you are one of the few that I feel did not swell with arrogance at that admission. We both know that we are capable of surprising the other. Our peoples have often clashed, but until now it has always been a business or war. After the days of the Shotometsu Chikage, our relations have never been personal. Your agent thought it appropriate to capture my granddaughter. You have my attention, and whether you want it or not, I am taking the first step of the negotiations, and they are personal as a gesture of goodwill. I will allow these negotiations to take a month to be resolved later. I will take action from that and assume that my granddaughter is dead. Don't push me to that point, old friend. I am willing to admit defeat, but don't think I will bend to your every whim. I may be the loving grandfather, I am still the girl. We both know what that is. It means it's also worth noting that one of my assets went missing at the same time this attack occurred. You'd also like to take credit for that, Professor.